Apparently Bob Coates needs to open the meeting.
He just left. There he goes.
All right, Bob, we're ready for you.
I'm on here.
Bob, can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay,
You could call the meeting to order and start the budget review?
Oh, okay. I didn't know we'd be doing that, but is Parker there?
yes,
Can he kind of run the meeting as far as calling on people and that sort of thing? Because I'm not going to be able to have visibility to everybody.
sure, I can do that. Happy to.
Okay. Okay, let's call the meeting to order and get started on the 2021 budget.
Okay, thank you, Bob. What I'd like to start out the meeting with is a review of board-approved budget guidelines. And let me remind everyone up front that this is the Finance Advisory Committee review of department and division budget inputs. So we'll have discussion among the Finance Advisory Committee members. I actually was expecting Mike Polson also to join us remotely, but don't see him on there quite yet. Maybe he'll join us shortly. We'll try to recognize Finance Advisory Committee members for questions and then open questions to board members and staff members that are in attendance. And Beth, if we have questions from the general public, the audience, we can, if you'll alert us to those, then we can respond accordingly. I will point out both for the audience in the room and for those that are linking in remotely, there has been one slide change. It is the capital plan for Public Works, slide number 50. I don't know that you can keep count necessarily, but it adds a below the line project. I'll let Jeff, or Chad, excuse me, let Chad describe that a little bit later. Those of you that are in the room have a supplemental one-page handout. Those of you that are linking in remotely, we'll try to point that out when the time comes. And we'll make copies available to you if you choose. We do have a few extra copies that are available at the admin office for those that would like to pick up a hard copy later on. And this morning, as we'll do each morning, all of the budget presentations are posted to the POA website. So we've had some requests for that and we followed through on that. So let's start with board-approved budget guidelines and the sequence of steps in budget development. Next slide, please. Okay, we're getting there. Okay, as always, we begin the next budget year where we left off last year. We started with the 2020 budget for the years 21 through 30, 10-year plan. That's the starting point. At an earlier board meeting, the board approved the staff recommendation of a 2% inflation rate for all years, the budget year and the 10-year plan thereafter. We are going to continue with last year's practice, which is to prepare the budget in two phases, a normal operating budget and replacement capital, and then we'll add in strategic investments and an in-depth look at reserves. We'll provide a 10-year stacked bar chart of what it takes to maintain the village and depict maintenance, program delivery, and administration as the three components of that stacked bar chart. At an earlier meeting of the board, board approved an assumption of a 3% maximum salary increase in the aggregate tied to performance, but to be confirmed by a survey of local firms. That survey has not taken place yet, but it will be between now and the end of the budget process, and we'll adjust accordingly if need be. We're starting with current staffing, rates, and benefit elections. They have been updated, to identify the people that are actually in those positions right now and their current rates and benefits elections, healthcare elections. Any increases in headcount will be justified by the department and division managers. So you'll see some of that as we go through this morning's presentations, and a little bit more on Tuesday and Wednesday. We'll consider current pricing structure for user fees, but it's the department and division head's responsibility to recommend changes as needed, and that's based on current market conditions and other factors. We've asked each department to identify the impact of COVID-19 on their revenues and cost structure, and we'll try to do that in a manner that can be summarized or consolidated up to a total company impact. I think we all know qualitatively what has happened due to COVID-19. We'll try to put some numbers on that as we get toward the end of the process. Okay, next slide, please. With the capital plan, we start with last year's 10-year plan and are adding known deferrals from 20 to 21. That's one of the themes that you'll discover pretty quickly, is that we've got a substantial amount of carryover capital from this year to next, projects that for whatever reason were not completed or could not be completed or made sense not to complete in their current form. We'll talk about those individually. Also, we'll see that the capital plan for 21 is higher than it was in the 10-year plan, primarily due to these deferrals. Get into those details more later. We roll forward known contractual obligations such as debt amortization schedules, the TRDA lease, multi-year contracts. And as a starting point, no new amenities are included. We carry forward last year's below-the-line projects, and we'll consider those individually as to whether those should move above the line and be part of the 21 and beyond capital plan. And we've identified or tried to identify those projects that might be considered discretionary. That is, they're not just replacement capital projects, but represent new capital, new machinery, new facilities, new whatever. We'll work with the board to identify strategic investments. Depending upon their magnitude and complexity, we'll try to maintain those separately so that they can be added into or omitted from the overall consolidation. We'll develop reserves funding, uses and balances given the impact of the aggressive 2019 capital plan and major maintenance projects. And we'll reflect inputs from the most recent road study, sewer study, water tank study, et cetera. We're starting with the assumption from last year on the rate of assessment increase. And you'll recall that was a 5% maximum increase per year through 2025 and a 4% increase thereafter. The goal there is to build reserves up toward some target level. Don't know exactly what that target level might be. We've had a couple of stabs at that, but that's not been subjected to rigorous evaluation as yet. Still, the goal, I think, which most of us accept, is that we need to replenish our reserves after some of those reserves were decreased in prior years. Okay, next slide, please. I won't go through all of this, but just for the record, these are the funding percentages contained in the 2020 budget and the 21 to 2030 10-year plan. So over 20%, almost 22% of net collectible assessment reserves is earmarked for the R&M reserve, only 1% for new amenities, water and sewer. You see the fees and rate structure down through there, docks, and so forth. So just a reminder as to where we're starting. These can change as we go through the process, but that's where we're beginning for right now. Next slide. And just a reminder as to what's in the budget, or what was in the budget as a starting point. I know some of these numbers have been changed as department and division heads have been working with the budget with help from Kevin Ellsworth and myself. But this is what was in there last year. And again, recall that we're being challenged to review all of these, make changes as justified and as warranted, so that the budget includes the recommendations of the department and division heads, and then all of that to be reviewed by this committee and ultimately by the board. And then finally, there was some board guidance that developed from our August 19th meeting. Wait for Ramon to get that pulled up. So one goal or bit of guidance, I wouldn't state that it's a goal, but target perhaps, is for no increase in total subsidies. That is for golf, rec, and food service. Not exactly clear how this will be measured, but with the COVID-19 impact, it's likely that golf can do better than the 2020 budget subsidies. Golf is already in 2020 beating budget pretty substantially. But rec is in a different environment and lagging well behind the 2020 budget. Yet to be seen what kind of recovery might be possible in 21. Similarly with food service, they were impacted greatly by the COVID effect. And so we'll have to see where they come out in terms of expectations for 21 and beyond. There was sentiment among the board that golf would need to adjust, that is raise rates on unlimited members for after 2 p.m. play. That currently is $515 for the year, including card. And I know that is getting some attention within the Golf Advisory Committee and golf management. Rec will need to review all rates in light of the COVID-19 impact. They've been asked to review relative rates for family versus individual memberships and consider a 2-person family rate with adders for additional members of the same household. Also been asked to do some analysis to determine current usage by that second member of the household and determine what kind of value we're receiving for those fees. And then review and possibly eliminate guest passes. Those were some of the comments related to rec. Docks, we've been asked to reconsider funding of the wave attenuator, possibly do that partly from the dock reserves and partly from R&M or unrestricted cash, since it benefits all homes and facilities along the protected shoreline. And we were asked to ensure that ACC permit fees are adequate to cover the cost of additional staff, trucks, and equipment, some of which has already been approved and more of which is being proposed for the 21 budget. Some has already been approved for this year. We've been asked to give careful attention to next year's budget, the 21 budget, but also identify longer-term capital and maintenance needs. We've learned, and this is appropriate certainly, that unbudgeted projects are not being well received by the board unless there is certainly adequate, more than adequate explanation and reasons for bringing forth an unbudgeted project. And oftentimes there are those reasons, but they need to be sound if they're expected to be approved. If there's a known need beyond 2021, the department heads have been encouraged to plant that idea by including something in the 10-year plan. I know we all, and I include myself in this camp, are anxious to kind of jump to the end of this process, net income, capital reserves. Well, we're not there yet. Okay, so we're still in the very early stages of this process. But to give you a glimmer of where we are at the moment, good news, we are in positive net income territory at the moment. A few $100,000, about $300,000 positive net income. But that's not nearly as favorable as the 2021 net income from last year's 10-year plan. So we've seen some erosion in, at the moment, at least in projections for net income. The number for capital is about the same magnitude as it was in 2019 when we had the two clubhouse projects. Now, it's different. You'll see a lot of carryover. I won't go into details. That'll come out in the presentations. But there's a couple of $1 million or more of carryover from this year to next. So some big numbers that we'll have to make some allowances for and consider each of those individually. Most of those are funded from reserves. So what that means is I will go through and estimate as best I can reserve levels that we expect to finish the year 2020. Those numbers will be higher than they were in last year's plan because we didn't spend it all this year, but the cash is there and building up. So it's going to be a different view for 21, more capital, more carryover, better starting position on reserves, but the real issue, I think, will be it's not where you start, it's where you finish. And we'll see how that shakes out over the coming few days and weeks. So with those comments, let me finish up entirely with a quick look at the budget calendar, which is the next slide. The highlighted line, we are here on September 28th. We'll do 29th and 30th for sure, October 1st if needed. I'm going to ask the Finance Committee members especially to hold the 1st, that's this Thursday, in case we need to get back together for some further discussion, reviews, or recommendations coming out of these 3 days. In years past, we've not needed the full session on Thursday. The board will review the operating budget and strategic investments on October the 7th. That's in this location. And depending on what comes out of that, we'll begin to layer in strategic investments and take another look at the assessment rate and reserves. So won't go through the rest of the budget, but all of budget schedule, but all of that is headed toward a November 18th approval of the budget. That means we've got a lot of work to do between now and the end of October and beginning of November. So with that, any questions on the process? Okay, hearing none, then I think we're ready for Public Works presentation. And this is an all-encompassing. It's Public Works, architectural control, docks, RVs, the whole shooting match.
So, first of all, I want to thank Jeff for all the help getting this ready, and I want to thank Jeff for all the help helping us get ready, and Kevin Ellsworth for all the help that he has given us. Chad and I are going to double team y'all today, since this is the first time of us doing this. So please be patient with us. But we'll get started.
I'd like to also thank Jeff for volunteering that we went first. Thanks, Jeff. No pressure whatsoever. This begins our water department. This is actually the utilities budget here. Utilities division, the entire division is the first few slides that you will see, and then we'll continue into the water department. So this is our whole utilities division, the comparative financial analysis. And of course, it includes our water, sewer, tanks, public works, maintenance departments. All right, so here's our 2021 budget, the water department. And this is the financial analysis for the water department as proposed in the 2021 budget. We have the 2019 actual, the 2020 budget, also the 2021 budget, and then the variance as well. And we'll talk about the expenses and things that were coming up, and also, well, revenue too as well, so. Now, we're gonna start with head count. For 2021, our request is 12 full-time team members, split between the water and the sewer departments. Now, that does include, we have another additional one seasonal that will be split between March and November, and it will be a seasonal that the money will be split between water and sewer. Now, our manpower, we're going to increase by one full-time member, and they will be split also between water and sewer as far as their benefits package and pay. So, and they will be there for additional help for systems, operations, service calls, and then updating the GIS system as well, so. Here's our water rates. We are proposing a 6% rate increase as built in currently. And these rates do not reflect the current negotiations with LUB. These rates are what was in the 2020 budget for 2021. Okay, so we have 4,563 residential customers, the 55 commercial customers, and the 112 POA accounts on the water side of our dynamic out there with the water system. Here's our regional comparison, and these numbers were pulled from the East Tennessee Development District, and they're based at a rate of 5,000 gallons. This is a regional average. The 2020 average is $44.98, 2019 $44. So our proposed Tellico Village with the increase is $32.67 for that 5,000 gallons. And then notice at the bottom there, the note, out of 29 utilities, there are only 4 others lower than Tellico Village in our category. Let's get us into small tools. We're going to replace, or not replace, we're going to add a line locator that will be very similar to the one that we bought in 2020. This price will be split between water and sewer departments. 2,000 from water department, 2,000 from sewer department. And also with the PC replacements, we're going to buy 2 Surface Pros in the water department. We're also going to do that same thing in the sewer department as well. We're going to use these Surface Pros as a way to access our GIS system, also for our maps that we have right now that are current, that we use every day to locate. And we're actually adding a lot of these things into the GIS system too as well. And we can also use it for our SCADA system, which is also how we monitor our system. Keeping that SCADA system available and right there every minute. I keep mine on my desk constantly just to make sure that we're keeping up with our SCADA, any kind of alerts, any kind of problems that are going on. Yes, sir?
Chad, I'm sorry, but going back to your prior slide,
Yes, sir.
you said there was 4 others that are lower than Tellico. Do you happen to know who those are?
It's in this East Tennessee Development District, and it would take me just a little bit to pull up the numbers, but they are right here. Would you like me to follow up with you on that,
Don't take
sir?
your time now, I'm just curious who they were.
Yes, sir. Let me write that down.
Question for you. Do you know in the new locating activity, are we using any of the technology in what's 3 words? Where you can type in 3 words in a field and it'll put you right to a 1 square foot GPS track area?
With our locator?
Yes.
No,
Or-
sir,
Or
not-
with the GIS system, are we building that capability? A lot of the assessors are moving to use what's 3 words because it's much more definitive as to where something would be on a property rather than just saying, yeah, I showed up and it's a lot. You could physically find 1 square foot on a lot using that technology.
I'm not familiar with that technology myself, but it would be something I need to look into.
Okay, yeah,
Yes, sir.
as I say, assessors are using it a lot, and a lot of the GIS systems up north have it, where they're putting that in, and it just pulls you in easier, and literally with 3 words, you can find 1 square foot anywhere in the world.
Wow. Yes,
It's-
sir.
It's easier than all the decimal points and,
Right,
coordinates, so.
right. Yes,
Phone
sir.
app as well, so it's even from a phone perspective, you could find it with a cell phone versus carrying a laptop around.
That sounds very interesting, something we need to look into. Yes, sir. Okay, under our maintenance of water lines, we've increased the normal maintenance of the water system from 349,000 to 372. Currently, at the end of August, we were at 342,176. And this is just by following our history and our August numbers and where that's going to project us to be at the end of this season. We have increased or made a request to increase this maintenance line to 372,000. Just to share a little bit of history for that line, our water leaks up to the month of August, year to date, were 135 water leaks, which was really good. When we compared those to the main breaks, only 12 of those were actually mainline breaks, which puts us at 123 residential or those service lines that are repairs in that. Which I feel very confident about. That I like the fact that we've only had 12 main breaks up to the month of August, which means that our main lines are holding, which means that everything, our investments that is in the ground is still very capable of carrying the pressures that we are putting on it and the demands that we have on our water system. So those are very beneficial for us as an operation, but just wanted to fill you guys in, and that's where that increase in the maintenance of the water system and those water lines comes from. We know that we have a system that's been in the ground now for several years. We will have to continue to work on these water lines, but I think we're in a very good shape to be in 2020 where we are right now with our water lines.
What's our percentage loss on the entire system running?
Average right now is somewhere in the upper 20%.
Upper 20? Okay.
Yes, upper 20% as an average.
And that's high, right?
Yes, I mean, and 20% is not terrible. I mean, if you call around in different areas that are around us, that's somewhere around normal, 20%.
But we're in the upper 20s?
We are in the upper 20s, yes, sir.
No, not like 28 or 29%, you're like at 20 point.
Oh, no, it is in the upper 20. I couldn't give you an exact number right now, Parker, but it is in the above 25%.
Oh, okay, misunderstood that.
Yes. And I think a lot of those things, we're trying to address those things just as we are water and sewer as well, but we're actually looking into different meters. I think we're losing a lot of flows that we're not catching with our mechanical meters, and I think that's something that we're going to be looking into as the years to come. Ultrasonics, they can read almost to the second decimal point. So we have actually tested that in the field. I have videos, and I have an area where an irrigation valve was leaking, and the meter was not spinning. The mechanical meter would not move until something else turned on in the home, and then it would spin. So if we're losing those low flows, I think we're going to gain a lot of our percentage back if we can go in a route of, moving with technology and the ultrasonic meters. That's just my personal opinion, and I will present that as we go through the years. But just want to let you guys know that I'm trying to be proactive as I can about that and try to make sure we curb this water loss as best we can, as quick as we can.
Thank you.
This covers our calibration of the RP tester, which we do the commercial backflow testing in-house. We have an in-house state-certified backflow tester, and the testing equipment that we use needs to be calibrated each year. And then the various tools and equipment that we use by the teams and then the maintenance of equipment is $5,400. Did I miss a slide? Oh, yes, this is our testing. I'm sorry, I missed a slide. I went by it back up here. This is our testing that we do yearly. That is our state testing. The first one is disinfectant byproducts, which is haloacetic acids. The second one is our BAC-T test that we do every month, and that's the charge there. And then the water booster pump stations maintenance will be the springtime maintenance on both the south booster pump and the booster pump at Coyatee, which both those pump stations need maintenance each year just to make sure that we're going to be good for the irrigation demand season. I apologize for skipping that slide. And here is our outside engineering, and this is something that provides additional support. We don't know exactly where we will use this. We want to make sure that we keep this in the budget for any kind of outside engineering for special projects and additional support for our team throughout the year. This is not, we will talk about in a minute, this is not our engineering, or it has anything to do with our engineering that we've got involved with our hydraulic study for the water system. And here's our consulting fee. This is broken down in a quarter. Each one of our areas through about the Public Works Department, water, sewer, public works, and maintenance will have that $4,500 annual fee, and you'll see that as we continue through these slides. That is for our GIS system. And something that we have been talking about even with our Public Services Advisory Committee, who have looked through this entire thing, put in their recommendations too as well. Something that we're looking at is, we're trying to, me and Clayton both, I would say I could speak for him, but we feel like our GIS system has a really big potential, and we're wanting to look at our baseline things. We feel like we're really close to having those things completed or populated, but there's so many options for that GIS system. There's so many things that we would love to have in those systems, and that's just something I believe you would say the same, wouldn't you? And so I think that that's something that we can work for and really use that and make it to where it can be really beneficial for us in the future and for anyone that's going to be using our system in GIS.
Chad, to
Yes.
what extent do you think we've got the GIS system populated today?
I'm sorry, what was that question?
The GIS system populating it with data, to what extent do you think we are today?
We were talking about that, and as far as baseline, I think we're somewhere around 70%. As far as the first layers that we have added, and that's, that includes anything from streets to, and Clayton can talk about that with roads, but anything for water, it's water lines and sewer lines, and, we've got our hydrants located in the GIS system with a pressure, with a flow on those in the GIS, and I think the baseline things were about 70%, but now my mind, I want to think about the bigger picture, and I think in the picture of the future and how that we could even have a GIS for each residential tank, each residential modification, each street valve. I mean, we're talking, we could build this GIS system up huge, and in that, with that mindset and the things beyond the baseline, I feel like we're somewhere around 30%, maybe something like that. So, but as far as baseline is considered, 70%, which is what we're working on right now.
Bob, I would say with streets, I'd be comfortable saying with some changes we made recently, that we're right at 100% of all of our streets logged in there, with measurements and stuff like that.
Okay, thank you, Clay.
This is the contract labor includes the backflow testing of the residential devices. This is a state requirement for us as a water system to have those backflows tested once a year, and this includes that cost. And it's repaid to the TVPOA by the homeowners. Now this is our part of our water department capital. Each year we replace 30 meters per month. And we're changing out those older radio read meters for better accuracy and labor savings. So that's where we're kind of taking this approach with changing out these meters. And we have to change out several of these a year anyways because of them not being able to pick up with the radio. So makes it a lot better for us as far as labor is out there to make sure that we're picking those up as we come by without having to return and go back to manually reading those meters. So this is for better accuracies, which should help us on water loss too as well. Whenever we change out those meters, maybe some of those older meters that are not reading exactly to the parameters that they should be, we change those out and try to make sure that we're keeping proactive on that. Now the water department capital, this is something that was in the 2020 budget, and this is what we now refer to as the water system improvements. So this is 1.2 million for that, which was basically, we're working with LUB and things like that too as well to try to get these improvements.
Let me make, excuse me, one comment on that. This is one of the big projects that is sort of a carryover, at least the dollars are a carryover from the 2020 budget. We had $1 million in the 2020 capital plan. that won't be spent this year. So those reserve funds will still be there at the end of the year to carry over into next. But now, instead of a $1 million project, we've got at least a placeholder for $1.2 million. So that's one of the big carryover impacts that we need to be aware of.
Sorry, the million is included in the 1.2 or additive to?
Would be included.
Included in the 1.2.
And it's not necessarily the same. The $1 million was for a water tank.
That's what I was just gonna say, is that the tank up here?
Yes, that was the $1 million in 2020.
And is that planned in 21?
We're gonna call that water system improvements. There's still a lot of things to be decided. May or may not be a tank.
That's what I was going to add to that a little bit. So the original thought was to install a new water tank, and that's $1.2 million. If the LUB contract gets settled out and they agree to the water pressure, we're still going to be not required, but we will need to put in 4 additional water pumps to maintain that adequate water pressure through the whole system, which is also $1.2 million. So whichever option, gets decided with LUB, that capital is pretty much the same for both options.
Okay, here's our capital plan for 2021 and the future plan up to 2031. We have, as you can see here, we have a mixer for the Chota water tank. Now, this is to improve water quality throughout the system whenever we do not have as high demands throughout the summer. During the summer months, our tank is going through several turnovers. The tank is fluctuating a lot of water because we're using a lot of water and the demand is high. During the winter months, our demand slows down, and the pressures that are coming through are 4 connections through LUB and the 1 connection from TAS into this part of the village is sufficient to cover the pressure demand on the system. Therefore, we use the tank a lot less. So what we would like to do for water quality is to turn this tank over, which is what this mixer would do. It would basically keep that water moving so that there's not disinfection byproducts, so that there's no funky water, no stagnant water, something that, that we're going to make sure that we're going to try to keep everybody as safe and as healthy as we possibly can, which is what this mixer will do for us. Second on the list there you see is the hydraulic water model and the master plan for the water system, which is $86,000. Now, this is a study that's done that is projected to be done or requested to be done by Jacobs. And Jacobs has, through their hydraulic plan, which I have all here in my notes and stuff, but they're going to do some flow calculations. They're going to do some measurements on pressure reading. They're going to address highs in our system. They're going to address any problem issues that we might have. They're actually going to go forward too as far as build out. That's something that they're going to talk about with us and make a master plan. What does it look like in the future for build out? What is our current water system? What is the demands? The water demands will be looked at through Jacobs, and this will all be part of this model and this master plan that we will work with them very closely as an operation, something that I feel like is very, very important for us in the future, something that will allow us to plug in numbers and new developments, new build outs in certain areas and how that's going to adjust the water demand in those areas, those that will be on irrigation, those that will be, just a meter that maybe they're pumping from the lake or whatever. We can add all those things in and make sure that, our water system is going to be, ready to handle the future build out. And I really feel like very, very passionate about that and want to make sure that we try to get those things, at least have those master plans and those back up with the model as well. As we talked about, there is our 30 meters per month, and it actually carries on into the years to come with those inflation rates, and then the water system improvements that we spoke of.
I got a question. I have a question.
Yes, sir.
You've been doing this meter change out for a few years.
Mm-hmm.
What % are we of having them changed out?
To change it out to?
What % of all of them that you have been changed out?
Well, see, that's a tough question because the meters will never get to a point to where we can have them changed out. Once the meters You know, the older meters that we've changed out a few years ago, the life of that meter may only be about 10 years. So we're just trying to make sure that we keep those moving, keep those changed out. But basically, we'll never get to a point to where we're like, you know what, we got them all, you know, because of the ones that we've changed out before will basically have to be changed pretty quickly into the future.
But I believe we're at 95% of having everything automatic read.
Oh, I'm sorry, was that the question to radio read? I'm sorry, I
Yeah.
misunderstood
But then
the
you
question.
start over again because the old ones have to be replaced. I
Yes,
know
sir.
that was the case.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood the question.
And Chad, I think where he's going as well is, are you comfortable that 30 a year is the right number? Or as the village grows, should that number be 50 or?
Well, it's 360 a year, not 30.
Yeah, 30 per month.
30 per month, sorry.
But still,
I'll turn in my CPA card now.
give them a calculator.
Let the other CPA in the room take a stab at that. 360 a year, I mean, that's the 30 per month. I think we said there were about 4,500 water customers, either current or projected for this coming year. So, you know, 360 a year would, on a 10-year cycle, would replace 3,600 meters. We probably need to step that up somewhat if we're truly on a 10-year cycle.
Because I didn't see an increase going forward. That's what I was curious. Or the increase is inflation.
Increase is just inflation. We perhaps need to consider bumping up the numbers as we go out.
Can I ask another question about that? Are you seeing an improvement of leakage as you change these things out? I know at one time you were talking about maybe getting false readings from the old.
We were in the 30s when we first started doing this, and we brought it down to the 20s. I argued with Chad about what it was.
Or even lower than that, didn't you, at one point?
Yeah, we got it down to 18%.
So why is it then back up to 28, 27, 29?
You have an aging system. It's 33 years old, so you're going to have a lot more leaks than normal. But a lot of it's accountability. A lot of it's accountability of how we account for the water used. Fire department uses water. Sometimes we don't get reported from that. How you estimate leaks, the size of pipe, how long they've been running. There's a lot of variables that goes into your water loss. That's why I argue with Chad every month about the number on the water loss. But yeah, we're still gaining with using these meters for sure. And Chad is aggressively looking into new meters to go in place of that, even better.
Because it's obviously doing things it wasn't originally designed to do. High sprinklers and, you know, all the, I mean, you guys are doing a great job for what you got to work with. Thank you.
So here's our
Hey, Chad.
takeaways from our water department. The water system improvements, the 1,200,000, the engineering studies, here's a big one that we missed on a slide that we'll have to kind of look at. The PM on the Chota water storage tank. Okay, so I have the report from late 2019, which we have to, by state requirements, have our tank professionally inspected every 5 years. So it fell in the fall of 2019, and we had a report come back that the inside and the outside of our tank is facing some concrete deterioration. So I have a full-blown report, and Pittsburgh Tank and Tower Group is the ones that done the report, and they came in and they done a full investigation that they normally do throughout the whole tank. We had to drain the tank for them to look through it and actually fix the silt. That was one of the things that we did have them do. There was a few things there that we had them do in early 2020 as far as tank repairs. But the two big items, when you combine those, end up becoming the biggest majority of this, $255,000. The exterior surface of the tank, basically we will be blasting that tank, cleaning it, patching it, and lining it. Now, when I say lining, the inside of the tank itself, we're seeing deterioration that is affecting both sides of the tank, inside and out. We have, and about 4 or 5 years ago, under my understanding, is we done some patchwork. We had Crom, which is the manufacturer of the tank, come in and they done some patchwork on some of the honeycombing and different things that they call it inside the tank. And it must have worked for a little while, but whenever it shows right back up in 2019, even though we've done it 4 or 5 years ago, I feel like the patchwork is just not substantial enough. I mean, it's just not working for our tank as well as it should be. Their proposal, as far as Pittsburgh Tank and Tower, is to completely blast the inside, patch up what they need to patch, and line the whole interior with 8 to 10 milliliters of epoxy lining, which would basically make an inside sealed up container. And then on the outside, they would clean the outside, they would do everything on the exterior, and then they would coat it as well. And they would make sure, not with the epoxy lining, they would do a different type of patch, or different type of cover, a primer and sealer. So this is something that, you know, when we done the 2020 sanitary survey, this was something that Greg Mize, which is with the state of Tennessee, Greg came in and done our sanitary survey for the water department, the water department this spring. And using his wording in the system that he put together here, it says number 4 in the sanitary survey. It says section 6, finished water storage, subsection B, inspection and maintenance of reservoirs, tanks, and clear well. The system's 0.5 million gallon concrete storage tank was inspected in 2019, meeting the 5-year inspection requirement. Inspection results indicated that the tank was in overall good condition. However, there's minor deterioration of the interior and exterior coatings, which should be monitored and included in the TVPOA capital improvement planning. And that was straight out of our sanitary survey by Mr. Greg Mize. So this is something that I feel like we need to be as part of our preventive maintenance, but as part of our maintenance of our water system, maintenance of our tank itself. And it's something that I feel like is very important as far as going into that. Does anybody have any questions about that? I know that's a really big number and something that deals with our current water storage tank, and something that I've got pictures here. We are seeing some of that deterioration through the tank walls.
How long does it take to actually do that? The tank is out of service for how long?
Whenever they take it out to do this job, I asked that question and I have not got a reply yet, but I would imagine it'd take a couple weeks. And it would have to be, we know for a fact it'd have to be during our time frame, because we can't have it shut down whenever we're in the high demands. So it actually have to be something that's done early in the season before irrigation demands kick in. We have to have that tank in service. So they will have to give me a time frame, but I'll have to keep them kind of controlled, and when they can give them, basically, you have to have this completed under certain circumstances.
At least the inside. They can do the outside when there's water in it, I assume, but they have to
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, the inside. Yes, sir.
Chaz, is this something we could, on the inside, hold off until 22?
With Greg Mize's study, I mean, he is the professional in his field, and with him saying that minor deterioration, he's seen the pictures, he's seen the results. I would more relay back to him on that. Like he said that it's something that we need to make sure we're putting in our capital improvement plan. I wouldn't feel comfortable myself saying whether we could make it to 2022 or not, or maybe possibly be fine till 2030. I'm just not comfortable myself saying that, Bruce.
Now, my question is if we take the tank down for 2 weeks, then we're depending on LUB and we're depending on TAS, I guess more water from TAS. If we depend on LUB, they got a 500,000 gallon tank also.
Yes, sir.
If we wait till latter part of 22, we may very well have 1.5 million at our disposal. So
Yes,
something to think about.
Right now, with the way that our system is designed, if we can get it done before April, May, Our demand is being met by the connections we currently have. But that's with the build that we have right now, and I think I didn't see any kind of pressure. When we had to take it down for the silt clean, we didn't see any kind of pressure issues throughout the system. We could keep it up because there wasn't such a high demand for irrigation during the current time. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Steve? Okay.
Chad?
Yes,
Can you
sir.
hear me?
Yes, sir.
Where does the 255 show up on your budget? Because I'm looking at your maintenance budget in 2019, 2020, and 2011. And your maintenance doesn't jump up by that quarter of 255.
That's a good question, Steve.
Because I'm assuming it's not capital, it's your ongoing long-term maintenance.
Talking about in the years to come.
No, you're saying you're gonna spend 255 next year on this tank repair at Choda.
Yes, sir.
Where's it showing your budget?
Yes, we'll have to look into it.
Parker, is it in there?
I believe it is, but I can't.
Steve, it's in line 6405 is the maintenance of water lines. So for 2021, he's proposing 387,000. So what Chad is talking about is in that number. Now, to fully answer your question, I need to go into the 2020 budget and see what's not recurring because you're not seeing the incremental increase for that full amount. So something's rolling off in 2020.
So are you saying it's in your maintenance line of 400,000 in 2021?
Yes.
Okay.
If we continue on this sheet, there shows the mixture. I'm sorry. Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to clarify, you have 86,000 in engineering studies as a separate line item. Are there any engineering studies in that 1.2 million also?
The 1.2,
Do you want me to answer that?
go ahead.
Carla, there's not. That 1.2 was the original capital for the water tank. And then Jeff and I discussed he's got two studies that he's proposing for next year. One is the hydraulic study of the total water system. I felt comfortable that we could capitalize that along with any pumps or tank that we go with, because it's really making sure that they adequately scope the project and their recommendations of what we would need. So I felt good that that does meet the requirements of capital. He's got another one down in sewer, which is more just for general knowledge of our existing sewer system. And that I told him he has to keep as expense because it's just like a normal consulting expense. So
Okay.
that's why it's separate.
Okay, thank you.
I've got a request for Chad and whoever else needs to be involved in it, going back to the water meter replacements. Replacing 360 per year when you've got an installed base of 4,500, over 4,500, that's about an 8% replacement rate, or about a 12.5-year replacement cycle. Now, we know that 4,500 number is going to grow as, new homes and new water accounts come online. And my concern is I don't want to see us get behind the curve.
Yes, sir.
So if we, need to start ramping up that 30 meters per month to something higher, I'd like you to do a little analysis around that and come back with a recommendation on whether, if it's adequate, fine, but if it's not, I'd like to see us start building that in to the 10-year plan.
Yes, sir.
Hey, Parker, I've got another question on that topic. If this new technology that Chad talked about, ultrasonic or whatever it is, if that's right around the corner, do we want to slow down and then wait for that new technology, or keep replacing our current population with the old technology?
We have already started this year to try to add in master meter as to who we are actually in kind of, with our meters, that's who we're using. And Master Meter makes a Sonata meter, which is an ultrasonic. And it actually reads just like our current system does. So it actually picks up with the radio read. So we're actually trying that different style of meter currently as we put those in. The price is really close to what we spent per meter. So, replacement with the ultrasonics, we actually get a little bit higher flows and we actually pick up the lower flows. So, we felt like that, we can try to at least add in some of these and see how that's doing with our radio reads and also with the system as far as seeing what the meters actually do themselves. So we are trying to use that new technology today.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
And we do have the half of the new hire, the full-time employee will come out of water, their pay and benefits and salaries. Half will be in water, half will be in sewer. That leads us into our sewer department budget proposal. And this is the comparative financial analysis that is associated with the sewer department. This slide is going to be very similar to the one you just seen in the water department because these two departments work together. And the new hire will actually be used half their time in water and half their time in sewer. As far as the numbers and stuff are concerned, we actually just work that whole department together. So the water and the sewer department team are 12 full-time team members with one seasonal that is split between them. And the sewer rates, we have a 6% rate increase recommended in the built-in currently. The residential customers for sewer is $44.28. Commercial customers is $37, and there's 30 POA sewer accounts.
Why are those numbers different from water?
Yes, sir. I figured you might ask that question. So whenever we do the water connections, whenever we do a new water meter, those customers are right then added to our water customers. Even though the house is just being built, just beginning to be built, they don't become a sewer customer until our tank is in, the final's done, and they're actually using our sewer system. So there's going to be a difference there in the number of homes that are being built. As far as a commercial sewer and in the POA account, sewer differences between sewer and water, we have a lot of water accounts that are commercial and the POA accounts that are entrance gardens that we are watering. Any of these meters that are added for a spigot or like for instance the dog park, we just put in a meter for those people, and had 5 spigots on it. So there's always going to be more of the water usage there as far as for irrigation, as far as for those type of deals, and that's the reason why there's a difference between those. Okay, here's our regional comparison based upon it's that same East Tennessee Development District that we have that these numbers come from. Based on the rate of 5,000 gallons, our 2020 average is at 60.38. Okay, and our proposed Tellico Village, first 5,000 gallons is 48.24. So out of the 13 utilities, there are only 3 others lower than Tellico Village in our category, as well inside that East Tennessee Development District. This is a repeat slide too of the water like I had mentioned before. The $2,000 is the half the price of that locator, the line locator. And then the $3,000 will be 2 more Surface Pros for the sewer department. So that will give us a 4 total for water and sewer to be used together there, and to use it for GIS and for the SCADA system, and also for the maps that we have currently right now that we use for location. Now, under our maintenance of sewer lines, KESCO is our grease control company. They come in every month and they do a lift station, basically a walkthrough. I have a monthly service report from those. And it says, Thursday, September 10th, we visited all 6 of the pump stations, Tellico Village Collection System, performed our monthly service. We inspected all equipment, checked the amount of biostimulant, inspected the wet well for grease buildup, and all equipment was operating properly, and there was very little grease present in the wet well. That's KESCO, their report for the month of September. So that is a yearly maintenance line that we have for those people to come out and check those lift stations. And then we have our air vacuum release program, and this is replacing 2 of those per month. Our air vacuum release is basically put on our high parts of our system. Our sewer system has to have an air vacuum release to allow air out, also to allow air into the system if needed. They're put on the high points to make sure that the wastewater is moving correctly. Make sure that the head pressure and the things are not, that we don't have any basically air locking going on, and so we've replaced those out. In years past, we've run into some water air releases that were on our sewer system, and that's something we're really attacking very quickly. A water air release is a lot smaller in diameter, a lot smaller release. It's a lot smaller unit because it's not allowing that much air out of the water system. Now in sewer, we have to have a pretty substantial air release part of this low pressure moving through system that we have with our force mains. So that's part of our program right there with the air vacuum release, changing those out. And here's our gate valve replacement. This maintenance of sewer lines continued. It's our gate valve replacement program. And we have several isolation valves throughout, I say several, there is a whole lot of gate valves out there in our system. So we want to make sure that we're staying proactive with exercising valves and actually making sure that we're inspecting those valves. If we have a valve that is bad, we're going to change those out, and that's what this money here is for. Now the carbon media replacements, that's our media replacements for our air scrubbers. And I know we've been talking about a lot in 2020 and I'm sure 2019 as well of odor issues. And these air scrubbers are the primary odor container that are around our lift stations. They're a unit that is put inside or right next to our lift stations that basically filter the air system. Basically any of that H2S gas, any of those gases that are releasing off of our lift station comes through our air scrubber and through that carbon media. Now the carbon media only lasts for so long, and once it's out, it's out. Once you begin to smell it again, that carbon media is gone. So these are replacements for those. We actually have, in this budget you'll see in just a minute, actually to add 2 more air scrubbers, and these carbon medias will actually help those be replaced too as well throughout the year. Trying to take care of this odor as best as we possibly can. And carbon is one of the best ways to take care of it. It is pricey, but it is one of the best ways, and we've actually had other units that's come out, other companies that's come out and looked at it and said basically what we're doing is really on top of the game. So hopefully that's the way we can continue with that. Mission communication on this line of maintenance of equipment. This is our $6,600 annual services contract. This is the SCADA system that I was mentioning to you all earlier that deals with our water and our sewer system. Mission communications is what we have to be watching this mission communications constantly. And it gives us anything from flows, from pressures, from alarms when it reaches certain set points. Our water tank and our south booster pump work through mission as far as the booster pumps themselves. So this is something that's highly used by your maintenance department, by your operators, something that I lean on a lot. I have it pulled up on my desk constantly. And through this SCADA system, we can see things really quick. Most of the time we can see a main line break within a few minutes. It will show up on one of our pressure chain, there'll be a completely fluctuation in pressure. We will see that and be alerted. And it sends out text messages, it sends out emails. I get a daily pump variance, I get a daily pump runtime reading that it sends me every day. So something. The normal equipment maintenance, we have $20,000 under it for just any kind of equipment that we're having out there that's going to need maintenance on it, under that maintenance of equipment line for the sewer system. And then the pump station R&M, we have $20,000 in there for that, $20,000 for any kind of refurb to a lift station or to, you know, just to cover the R&M parts of the system. We're gonna have to maybe replace a valve, maybe replace the way that a system is operating as far as our lift stations are concerned. That's what that money's in there for, the pump station R&M. Now, we have under maintenance of equipment to recoat 2 sewer lift stations, wet wells with CTR coatings. Sequoia and Malacqua are the 2 that we have left. We have coated every other lift station in the village with the exception of 3, which I'm gonna try to get our funding request. That money was in 2020, and I'm gonna try to get those funding requests in as quick as possible to have those 3 lift stations coated. This will finish up our coating, and those coatings, according to CTR coatings, are supposed to last for 10 years. That's the reason why you see them out in the out years, spread back out to do those coatings on the lift station. This actually helps for the deterioration of the concrete inside each lift station. The H2S gas is very corrosive, and it's harmful. Anything that's above that wet well line where the actual wastewater itself is setting, anything above that is usually what takes the deterioration. Anything that's covered in the wastewater actually stays in better shape than it does for the area that's above, that's taking all the gas and the things. So that's what this does, and it allows our guys to be able, if we need to spray those out, if we need to be able to clean those, the coating, actually you can tell that the coatings that we put in the past are still there and still operable. We can spray those down, and it's just like a smooth surface. Those that have been deteriorated that have not had the coatings yet are pretty rough, and so that's what we are requesting here.
So that's the Pepto-Bismol coating, right?
Yeah.
Pink
yeah,
stuff?
Yep. Yes, sir.
The pump station at the end of the driving range on Kahiti Trail, there's always an auxiliary, or I should say always, but a lot of times an auxiliary pump sitting there. Is that not functioning or not capable of the capacity now, given the build-out?
In 2020, we had an issue with the pump that's inside the wet well, and the pump we thought originally could be maintenanced and brought back. Whenever it got tore into, we decided, and Water and Waste were the ones that helped us, the contractor we had that helped us. They found that the pump was failed. That pump was done.
Okay.
To get a new pump took us 2 months, and to have a crane to set the pump. He attempted to set the new pump with a crane and couldn't get it over the wall. So that bypass pump had to stay there because we had to have something to lean on. If we had one point of failure in there and something happened to there's 2 pumps in each wet well. If something happened to the existing pump, we'd had to have that bypass. But yes, it is in there now, and our bypass is gone, so thank goodness.
Is there a plan for the odor that's still there?
Do what now?
The odor problem?
The one at Kahiti?
Yeah.
Yes. We have an air scrubber in there as well, so that'll be part of our carbon media change out. Yes, sir. And we have a pump replacement at the lift stations for $16,000, and this would cover any kind of pump that we had to replace inside those stations. All right, this is our outside engineering, and it's basically just like the water department. We have additional support for staff or for special projects throughout the year, and that's $12,000 for anything that we would need to lean on engineers for those type of studies or for their expertise in those. And then here's our hydraulic sewer model. It's $82,000 for the hydraulic sewer model. It is similar to the water hydraulic modeling, but in the sewer system, there's things that are different, and there's going to be some flow studies done there too as well, some pressure studies done. They're going to really basically see if our build out and the existing wet well systems and the existing pumps that we have inside of our wet wells, inside of our lift stations, are sufficient for build out. This is going to be something that's going to be huge for us in the system in the future for the system, because we're going to be able to look at this model, use this hydraulic model, and allow Jacobs to help us with this to see if we need to have any capital expenditures in the future. We may have to expand a wet well. We may have to build or put in a higher head pump, a higher horsepower pump in some of these places, and that's what this model is gonna show, how the wastewater is moving through the system complete, all the way out to our main lift station, which then pumps out to LUB, and the main lift station's included, which each one of these smaller, more regional lift stations too will be in that study as well. This will not go all the way back to the residential tanks that come all the way up to the street valve, which is on everybody's lot, split between two tanks. They will basically be the force main, which is what we call past that sewer street valve, and it will basically take in each one of those as it goes through the system. Those force mains will be a part of this hydraulic model study from Jacobs.
Chad,
Yes, sir.
we did one of these in-house 2 years ago. What's the difference?
What's the difference between what
What-
Mr. Murray done and what
Yes.
this one is?
Mhm.
This gives you more confirmation of things that we looked at, and as the system gets larger, things are going to change, so pump size may need to go up in places, not necessarily increasing wet well. I'm sure we will have to in the future, but pump size is one of the big things that we're looking at.
Well, I thought that study addressed that. I think what you need to do is go back and look at that study to see exactly what you need to do here. Just to do a study, because I hear you saying, underline it, we're gonna have to do these periodically, but how often is periodically? Like, if we did one 2 years ago and it told us we were good through build out except for a few pumps that we needed to replace and a few things. I think you need to go back and dust off that study and look at that and see what that study said. And if we need to do it, let's do it instead of just doing another study.
Yes, sir. I will go back and look through that study. Yes, sir.
Thought the next slide coming up.
The next one is the Onuga sewer study. Now, the Onuga Way area causes a little bit different. It's completely different from what our hydraulic model will show throughout the main parts of our lift stations. This is something that's kind of separate. If you're familiar with the Onuga area, Onuga Way is across if you turn at Toqua Coves and you head all the way back to the very back of what we call Chogi, that goes off the end of the hill there down to Watkins Road, which is a county road. It basically goes all the way around the slough that goes back in there. So it's on a hill across from Toqua Coves. It's kind of its own little separate circle there, and so what we're having is we're having head pressure issues there. So there's such a hill at Onuga Way, and there's such a hill it has to overcome to be able to get the wastewater back into Toqua lift station, which is where it's headed. From the time that their pumps kick on, it is heading up that hill through those large valleys that are between 444 and Watkins Road, and then it's trying to pump all the way into Toqua lift station. As it comes back around and it's making around this slough, it's trying to get back up this hill, it's having to overcome the head pressure from the pumps that are beyond that point as well. So this is something I've took Adam Byard, which is our Jacobs engineer, the one that's looked at some of these and the one that's proposed these models for us. I took him up there and I tried to explain exactly. I took him actually to one of our trouble areas and said, this is something we need to try to address. And I know that there's going to be alternatives here, which is what this study will take into effect. Several alternatives that he will try. And then there is even money in that same for the $80,000 to do a drawed out detailed plan on what the fix is. And he tried to err on the high side, because if it's something like adding a smaller lift station in that area to boost that pressure up the hill, then that's going to be a pretty substantial number. So he's actually going to do this alternative study, then he can be able to give us a more detailed plan on where we need to go next with this. So it's a separate issue completely than the hydraulic model will show through the lift stations.
Hey, Chad, can any of these, between the sewer study and the modeling, can that data be leveraged to propagate the GIS system to more than just baseline?
Yes, I'm sure we could definitely use the GIS system to put these numbers in as far as where we're getting flow calculations and where we're getting pressure. Yes, sir, we can actually absolutely use GIS for these things.
Okay.
And here's our quarter of our GIS annual fee for the $4,500. It's for the actual software cost, yes, sir, and maintenance their side. I have administration part of the GIS, but Tony Schreiner is the one that actually maintains the system. So adding a new user, adding a new person, as we will with the new hires from this year with ACC, I can't do those things, and this whole GIS, the whole keeping it going, keeping it up to date is all them, and so that's our maintenance fee for that, yes, sir.
But it's software as a service.
Yes, sir, it is a
We don't
service.
own the software first.
Right, it is a service, yes. Yes, sir.
Yes.
So it could go up. It could go up.
Well, as long as you choose to use the software, because a lot of software vendors are moving to that on-demand type model rather than making one investment. Like, I see Sue nodding over there because, you know, with an IT background, usually about 15%, if you own the license, they'll knock you about 15 to 18% a year in software upgrades, break fixes, that sort of thing. This way, you pay an annual fee, but they maintain all the software. It's our data, but it's really almost a hosted environment.
Is it running on our server, Kevin, or is it up in the cloud?
We log into it on a website.
Yeah, so it's all, so we're not paying for servers and IT people to maintain servers and switches and all those things either, so.
We're not hiding a data center anywhere.
Right.
Yes,
sir.
18,000.
This is our cost estimates, the maintenance forecast that we basically use to try to show the maintenance of our lift stations through the sewer system. And we have those broken down as pump replacements and wet well coatings, replacing the controls, and just some R&R, some of those major R&M issues that we'll face. So we use this to try to lean on whenever we're trying to go forward and propose these things. And it's something that we've used for budgeting purpose this year as well, so.
And this is built from that study that Mr. Johnson was speaking about.
Yes, sir. Okay, in capital, we have a truck for the sewer department. And this will have to be an additional truck to our fleet because of hiring the new full-time employee. This will have to be the vehicle that we make up with having that person available to get out there into the field. The air scrubbers, we have 2 of those budgeted, 2 of those in the request for replacing those to have the air scrubbers. The main one that I personally see and smell, and the main one I think a lot of people that are going down 444 is Tenasseee Shores, which is actually the one between Sequoia Road entrance and Tenasseee entrance. The one that's, there's a valley there, and a lot of times when you get down into that valley, what you're smelling is that lift station. So if we can get an air scrubber there, and this will also add another air scrubber for our Malacca area. So Tenasseee Shores and Malacca lift stations. And this price is based on the scrubber we installed at Tenasseee Coves here in 2020. So it's been very beneficial to the odor control in the Tenasseee Clubhouse area. So just trying to move forward with our odor reduction plan there. Now, this was a big one, the vacuum excavator. This is a machine that I have priced through Vermeer that basically is a suction lift machine. It has a 3,500 PSI water pressure system on it. It is a pull-behind trailer that has a 500 gallon capacity vacuum suction tank. Okay, and it has the high water pressure system. It has the 1,000 CFM roots blower. This is a very unique piece of equipment and something that a lot of our sewer departments and the utilities around us that they use this machine. And I used the numbers to compare this with on Roto-Rooter. We have to have Roto-Rooter come out several times a year, multiple times a year, to pump down either residential tanks, pump off main lines through a flushing station, anything similar of getting the line pressure off. We've had them do several different things for us as far as the sewer system goes. So far, year to date, in August, we have spent $47,000 with Roto-Rooter in 2020. So if this unit will not be able to lift what that big pumper truck can lift. The lift on that pumper truck is about 40 feet. So below the tank itself, it can pull up anything from 40 feet. This vacuum excavator will only lift about 10 feet. So we thought maybe if we could cut out half of Roto-Rooter's bills to us, some of the times that we have to cut them, and we'll have this thing in-house, something that we can get to the line quick. If it's something that's really close to the road, we'll definitely have enough suction lift there to do whatever we need to do. And we can clean out around valves. That's one of the things that a lot of these people use is they use this blower and they use this high pressure water system to clean out inside a stack around a valve. And they can blow that water down in there and then they can clean it up with a vacuum. So that's what that vacuum excavator is for.
So, Chad?
Yes, ma'am.
Just wondered, okay, so if that means then that you'll be taking on half of that time to do that, are you including in there the human resources to do that?
Yes, ma'am. When we thought with our additional one person will help with that, and then we'll have to spread out throughout our current team, and with our seasonal guy, that will definitely be one person that will have to use some of his time right there.
Okay, so you accounted for.
Yes, ma'am. That was our suggestion. Water and sewer will definitely be some of his too. As far as GIS, we're just trying to spread out the workload a little bit to try to cover that too as well.
I'm assuming when Roto-Rooter's there, you've got some of your personnel there anyway.
Yes, we do. Yep. And a lot of times Roto-Rooter calls are after hours calls too, you know, we don't know what we're gonna get through a weekend and things like that, which makes their costs go up some too. But yes, we do have somebody there on call or whatever. And if it's through the day, then we do have there too, so.
And then Chad, the other thing is I've got a note to myself to make sure that if we are going to save some dollars in Roto-Rooter, which should be part of the return on the investment for that vacuum, we should see a drop in some of that expense. So just as a follow-up, you and I can kind of make sure that that's reflected.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Ken. All right, then these two bypass pits. One of these bypass pits will go into Malacqua lift station. It'll be in that area right next to the lift station for us to be able to bypass that lift station and use a bypass pump to pump out the wastewater. While that Malacqua lift station is having a coating done or any kind of maintenance inside the tank, we have to make sure that we're bypassing that wastewater so that we can do maintenance to those tanks. Malacqua currently does not have a bypass pit, and Coyotee will be the second one. The Coyotee lift station does not have a bypass pit. It has a way to bypass the wastewater on down the system, but it does not have a pit. And I would feel more comfortable if we put a pit in each one of these. And when I say pit, I mean the tanks that we are currently installing for residential, the 1,000-gallon tanks that we're putting in. We would have our contractor who does our hourly equipment rates and things that works on our system. We would have him bury both of those tanks and hook those up for this $20,000. So the takeaways from the sewer department would be the $40,000 for the wet well coatings, the 6% rate increase, and then those two big system studies, the hydraulic model and the Onuga study for $162,000, and then of course the new hire, which is split between water and sewer. Whoops, sorry. Go ahead, Steve.
All right, two questions. Going back to your vacuum excavator.
Yes, sir.
I heard you right. You said if we can cut half of the Roto-Rooter service. Sounds more like a wish and a prayer versus an actual action plan that you have data that you can support. You will cut it by half. So which is it, a wish and a prayer, or do you have data to support it?
Well, our data is gonna be inconclusive because there's gonna be different places that we're gonna have issues with that we may not have the 10 foot of suction lift. So it's gonna be really hard to say, we're gonna have a leak right here that we can use the excavator on, or we're gonna have a residential tank that we can actually get to. It's gonna be really tough. So what I thought is, with the way that Roto-Rooters went in the past, and where we've used Roto-Rooter for flushing stations and any of these things that we can actually get to, that vacuum excavator could really be beneficial to us. And the number may not be half, ultimately, but that's what we would be shooting for. It's just hard to say where we're gonna have issues inside our system and where we're gonna be able to get our excavator to.
Okay, second question. All right, I still think it's a wish and a prayer, but let's go to the next one. We go back to your
47,000.
budget. 2021, you have an other expense of $191,000. What is it?
$191,000.
In other,
Steve, it's all that consulting work that's rolling through other, in that, it's how those FAC formatted P&Ls consolidate that expense. So whatever you
doesn't go-
decide,
it doesn't
whatever
go for
everyone
professional
decides on
fees?
that consulting costs, that's what's driving that other.
so you just don't put it in professional fees.
I'm sorry, what?
You have a line item called legal and professional fees.
Yeah, that legal and professional fees, that's really isolated for our audit fees. There's some consulting for the lobbyist, so it's been more that type of service, not consulting like that.
All right, thanks.
Yep.
Chad, on that question that Steve was just asking you about on the, trying to get the right word for it here. Where you're cleaning out the lines instead of using Roto-Rooter. Yeah, I do. You should be able to go back and, for the last year, and tell us which one of the calls that Roto-Rooter did, which one of those that you thought that you could have done. Right? So out of that 47,000, you ought to be able to tell us how much of that you think that this scrubber thing, or whatever it was called, I've lost my page. Vacuum excavator. You could tell us which one of those Roto-Rooter calls could have been used, you could have used the excavator on, correct?
Yes, sir, we'll try. Yes,
Okay,
sir.
yeah.
47,000 was just through August, correct?
Yes, sir.
So,
It's more like 71 for the year.
so go back and take a look at those calls that they've done. Tell us how much of that 47,000 that you, if you'd had an excavator, you could have avoided.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And one thing to add to that, Bruce, I think Chad's being polite, because I go through about, I want to say about 30 Roto-Rooter invoices a month, and they're individually billed like that. So for him to go through each one and say, could this have taken the place of that? That may take him a little bit of time to do, because there's not a clean way to aggregate those invoices by type.
Well, he knows when he's called them in. He knows where they were located, so he ought to be able to tell you what percent of those is nothing else that he could have used to excavate.
Yes, I think we can give a good idea. It's just gonna be hard to get exactly without going back to each unit.
You're trying to defend $54,000 investment.
Yep. Yes, sir.
How many years would it take to pay for that stuff?
Yes, sir.
We'll also go back to 2019 and pull that data up too, give us our best estimate at it.
I think we can also look at where we are digging up valves to clean out around them, to where we can't use them. We can look at those where we could have used this vacuum excavator to clean those out, instead of going out with a backhoe digging those up and clean them out and reinstalling them. We can look at that too.
Yes, sir. Did that answer your question, Winston, that you had?
I just looked for a number, how much we pay Roto-Rooter next year?
Oh, I just know till August it was 47,000. this year, Winston, I'm not sure about 2019. This is our new utility installations for the spreadsheet for the financial comparative.
Chad, can I make a real quick comment? For the new utility installs, it's all predicated upon the new home starts. And for the 2021 budget, we've got 120 installs. So if you remember, in the 2020 budget, we've had 130, and we've more than exceeded that. So this decline basically matches what was in the 2020 budget in that 10-year projection. So that's an assumption that we can talk about, but that decline, at some point, we're going to run out of people from Minnesota and New York moving down here. But right now, that's what's really driving the revenue and the cost of service. The water connection fees stay flat after, if you remember, I think it was Mr. Colacone that kind of championed that increase last year. So the water connection fees are right now at $1,000, and the sewer connection fees are at $1,400. So that's what's really driving the tank installations. And on the cost of service side, the cost of an installation right now is at $6,975, which is flat to last year. And that is both a combination of labor and materials. So I don't see any projected increase from Vulcan Materials for the cost of gravel and backfilling the pits. I know Teleco Dirt Works, I think that's up for renewal soon, but right now there's no assumed cost increase for that labor piece as well. That's it.
So as a takeaway, this is conservative versus what we're experiencing, because this year, we're always very favorable in installs.
Correct,
So
and that
do you
install.
anticipate this is conservative as well?
Yes, Brad, and that conservative new home start will impact more than just utilities. It'll also impact assessments, and it kind of flows through several different areas that are kind of volume-based like that.
So Kevin, is that the right number? We should be using it for installs next year?
Crystal ball.
I mean, that's a good question, and we typically try to take a conservative, that is, lower end of the range view on that. I'm reluctant to go too high on that. As Kevin pointed out, it affects your assessments, it affects transfer fees, it affects water and sewer connections. It flows through a lot of different areas of the budget, and I tend to try to budget revenue on the conservative side just to make sure that, if the worst happens, that we've got enough money to operate with. Well, okay, this year the worst did happen in certain areas. No one could have foreseen that, the specifics of it certainly. But I'd hate to build a budget around an optimistic revenue projection and then load up more on the expense side, to match up with that. So we try to be fairly conservative on all that. Yes, we benefit if, lot sales and home building exceed expectations, but I tend to come down on the side of, I believe it when I see it.
Parker, as I recall, in the 10-year plan, that number continues to reduce by like about 10 a year.
I think that's correct.
Yeah, and so we are going to get more and more conservative as we go out in time.
Right.
If we actually have a better year than that, that's basically great.
Yeah, and at some point, all of the POA lots will be sold. At some point, the village will be at practical full build-out. I don't know exactly what that number is, but, that day may come sooner than we expect. I don't know exactly what kind of trajectory we're on right now, but, it could come sooner rather than later. certainly the last couple of years and this year, you know, the kind of rates we're seeing are, I mean, it's gonna fill up, pretty quickly. And toward that point, I think, and Chad and company are, you know, doing a good job at trying to anticipate this. We need to be sure that that water and sewer system is adequate if that build-out happens sooner, rather than later. You don't want to get behind that curve. Hence, part of my questioning around meter replacement. So, and there's other areas as well we need to be sure that we're up to date on that.
Oh,
Sir?
Yes, Steve?
Kevin, are you gonna put out, your basic NFI assumption table for the next 10 years? Because a lot of these numbers link back to these assumptions, and we're talking about one big one right now.
Yes, I'm in the
120
process
home
of building that
permits, so
NFI schedule,
I'm
Steve.
assuming for this cut, you've just left all the NFI assumptions the same?
No, I'm in the process of updating that schedule.
No, but I'm saying the numbers we're looking at today is using the NFI assumptions we used last year for the 10-year plan.
Yeah, I think-
Because you're
I think
assuming
that-
120
I
house
think
starts,
I'd
which
say
is the
it's
NFI assumption we had in the current budget.
Yeah, I would
For
say for the
2020.
majority of the assumptions, Steve, that is correct. And then I also want to point out, one exercise that Parker and I will go through is before the budget gets completely finalized and approved by the board, we'll continue to update those assumptions based on the current performance for the remainder of 2020. And then when that jump-off point takes place, we'll have, you know, obviously a more accurate number going into 2021.
So as an example, if the board decides that, with you, that number of home starts ought to be 140, not 120, there's going to be some significant changes to some of these budgets.
Yes.
Okay.
And like Parker mentioned, a significant increase in a lot of different revenue items as well.
Right.
Steve, that kind of change is relatively easy to make, but, you know, it does have wide-ranging, implications for things like, assessment income, bad debt expense, subsidiary sales of POA-owned lots, water and sewer connection fees, number of water and sewer customers. It touches a lot of areas, so it's a significant assumption. Again, we tend to plan on the conservative side and benefit if we beat that, but certainly that can be adjusted if we feel that this is overly conservative.
Yeah, typically when, in my experience on building a budget, you start with the NFIs first. What are your basic assumptions on delinquencies, number of new home builds, et cetera, and then you get into your cost budgets. What we've done here is just assumed everything stays the same as we did last year, put your expense budgets together, and now we're gonna come back and review the NFIs. It's, we're doing it later versus it should be the first thing you do, agree on NFIs.
We'll present some of that tomorrow and some more of that on Wednesday. If we need to adjust, we can.
Any other questions before we move on to Public Works? All right, moving on. This is a comparative financial analysis for Public Works. Moving on, at this point, we have 16 full-time team members. We added five full-time members this year. Y'all approved that in the budget for 2020. We eliminated the 7 seasonal that we were using, brought on 5 full-time to where we didn't have to keep replacing people for mowing season and leaf season and spending the time to retrain people and stuff. So that's where we're at this point. In small tools, we have money in there for weed eaters, leaf blowers, chainsaws. That is something we're always using. They're used a lot. Software, we have some money in there for PC replacement. Have money in there for streets, you know, for doing paving and patching and crack sealing, all those things that we have to normally do. We have to maintain our streets.
Clayton,
Yes, sir.
can I go back to that previous chart on small tools and
Yes.
PCs? Do we look across the department to see, for small tools and software, do we look across the department to see how much that is for the department? Not just individually for water and sewer? Do we look across so that we can see if we can get synergy or discounts if we make bulk purchases?
Yes, sir, we do. Before we purchase anything, we get with the other departments to see what's going on. You know, a lot of times, we will even reach out to golf and see where they're buying equipment, you know, small tools, stuff like that, to see if we can group with them to get a better deal.
Because we're looking at these as stovepipes, and if we look across horizontally at things, especially as we talk about having a purchasing agent that's full-time, that's something we need to look at, see if we can cut some money from some of these areas where, you know, we look across all departments instead of just looking at a stovepipe.
Yes, sir.
I understand what you're doing here in the budget, but I just want to make sure that we're looking across it when we actually go to executing, if you will.
That is one thing that our PSAC committee brought up with us too. So it's something we do look at. So back to our next slide, you know, we got money in there for restoring shoulders. We're always pulling shoulders. With 220 miles of street, there's always shoulder work that needs to be done. Got to keep the rock up to the edge of our roads to keep the roads from breaking off and stuff. Next, we have HA5, pavement management. We are following our guidelines of our pavement management plan, doing those things that they have recommended, that we paid to have that study done, and we are using it. So we have HA5 planned, we have some paving planned in resurfacing in Katy, and some work at Tokwa, which is in the golf budget on the parking lot and the additional parking. And our total payment program is a little over $1 million for 2021.
And is that taken into account the assumption change due to road width?
Yes, sir, it does. This is something that, this material for a sign shop is in there. We got corrugated metal pipe replacement and street lights, new and replacement for those street lights that we have out there. We have to maintain those, and that is something that is constantly going on. We have money in there for rock salt. Hopefully, we do not have to use that. If it never snowed in Tellico Village again, that would be fine with me. That's why a lot of y'all moved here, to get away from the snow. Then we got money for ditch line repair, shoulders, and tree removal, and, you know, that's something that's always going on. And then the dump fee for brush and leaves, that's for our fee for that too. This is a big item here. This is our street sign post and sign replacement program that we started a few years ago. This will complete the village. We missed a year in there, and we're trying to complete this. Believe it or not, it's amazing how many phone calls I get from property owners wanting to know when we're going to replace the ugly signposts and stuff in their neighborhood. It's a lot less to maintain because we're eliminating half of our street signposts in the intersection, so it's a lot less to maintain. And then this one, you may be wondering, what's this sign shop equipment and sign material? This is throughout a year in the village, we'll spend an average of $10,000 to $12,000 sometimes on signs, replacing street signs and material throughout the village. And this will give us, this is the equipment and all of the material to maintain, with the equipment to make our own signs and the material to replace all the signs for 2021. So 2021, looking at the signs that we would have to buy, we were looking at about $23,000 for signs. So we can buy all this equipment, build our own sign shop, make our own signs during rainy days, and we can keep all of our signs in the village looking better, keep them looking the way that the Telco Village deserves, and, you know, save money overall.
You have vacant shop space to put this machine equipment in?
We have space, we have to enclose it, it has to be climate controlled, and we have that money in there to do that. This is maintenance of common property, which is something we're always doing, is trying to maintain these trees. Maintenance for 30-plus trucks, SUVs, oil changes, tires, minor repairs, and supplies. This is backhoe, dump trucks, graders, mowers, just maintenance on those pieces of equipment, and some money in there for security cameras, maintenance. We've got a little bit of money in there for engineering, you know, to provide some additional support, you know, throughout the year if we needed some on something. And there's the fee for GIS. And consultant fees for bidding and testing and specifications if we get in those situations where we need some help. We got some contract labor. This is our street right-of-way mowing, and we do mowing of other areas. We have to do some of our right-of-way mowings and all of our right-of-way mowings, and then our utility easements, some of those areas where we have our water and sewer main lines, we have to go in and have those mowed. And then this is the debris grinding, where we grind the mulch to where we're not buying mulch for all these entrance gardens, and then the gardens that are in cul-de-sacs throughout the village.
This is kind of a general comment for everybody, but these numbers would mean a lot more to me if we were also comparing it to the 2020 budget, and then any year-to-date outlay. It would just be easier to say, to put these in perspective.
Okay.
And that's not just for you, it's for everything we've seen so far.
Okay. Any more questions before we move on? Yeah, takeaway is road maintenance. That's a huge part. And we have this capital section here. If you look, our main capital is a brush truck. You know, we gotta have a brush truck. That's $170,000. And then we have a small mower, a FAC machine for our Bobcat, and a milling machine for our Bobcat. If you have any questions about those pieces of equipment, I can tell you about those.
What's a FECon?
A FAC is a grinding machine. It's like a bush hog, but this thing will clean up areas that our bush hogs won't.
I had to look that one up too.
I've seen them. I didn't know what they were called.
Yes, sir.
Now, Clayton, that brush truck is the higher cost than what was proposed for this year, correct?
We have a funding request turned in right now, I think to Parker, and I think that is at $172,000, I think. And we got on here 170. The problem is, the reason why it varies is every time we can get a good hard number on a truck, it gets sold, because so many are going, people are buying these, taking them to the coast, working these storms and stuff, so that's where we're at. Right now I have a guy that says he'll hold us one. You know, I've got a couple of bidders, got 3 prices on one. They're gonna hold them for us, you know, that price for a month. You know, I told them we had to give time to see what our board of directors wanted to do. We could not commit to anything, so.
Yeah, that funding request is in progress right now. And one of the questions that came up, we've got a dealer that's a little bit closer to home. I think it's near Nashville. I forget what town?
It's Goodlettsville.
Goodlettsville, thank you. They were not the low bid. They were, I don't know, $4,000 higher, I think, than a bid from Kansas City. But, you know, we probably would recommend that bid on the basis of better access to not local service, but it's more local than Kansas City would be. So we'll see where that comes out. That's working its way through approvals right now and probably will come to the board at the next board meeting. And if it does, if it gets approved this year, then that request for 21 will drop out.
And this is a new truck? It's a new truck?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So, question. Right now, we have two gravel trucks, as I understand, they're both kind of incapacitated.
Yes, sir.
So you're only replacing one,
Yes.
and you can get the job done with one?
Yes, and our hope is when things slow down and people get back to work from this coronavirus, that maybe we can find some parts and get one of them repaired to have as a backup. You know, the running gears, the motor, transmission, rear end and stuff of those are in great shape. It's the grapples and stuff on them and, you know, the working equipment. And we're in the process of looking for new grapples and parts and stuff. They're old and outdated, so there's not a lot of people producing parts for those.
Just a curiosity question, Clint. And does FEMA sell these units at the auctions after there have been major storms? After they've been down and been used, do they sell those at auctions?
I don't know. We
I have no idea, just curious.
I'm not sure. We have reached out to some brokers that buy and sell equipment that are helping us locate some. And my big concern with those, if you take them to the coast and you work storms for 6 or 8 months and you do no maintenance,
And they're a
you
mess,
may
yeah.
but you might be buying something that's been torn all to pieces.
And there's a new fire starting in Napa, so California is just all on fire.
Yeah.
Anything else before we move on?
Yeah, Clayton, this is the slide that, well, not that slide, but the one before it, the capital slide, that one, that is in your supplement, your replacement. So could you speak to the below-the-line project highlighted in orange?
Yes, that is the Chattooga Road extension, Chattooga Drive extension down by 5 Star where Cook Brothers are doing the big, called the Grove area. We are looking at extending that road on down to Chio, to where that road loops around. There's not just one way in, one way out. And we're in the process of contacting property owners and stuff. Those property owners were living there. You know, it's not right just to go in and build a road beside them and not let them know. So we're doing the right thing by the homeowners and property owners. So we're in the process that we wanted to go ahead and get that in there so it would be on your radar, that that's something that may happen. Yes.
One other question regarding that. Is Cook Brothers going to, you know, pony up any of the money for that? We're going to reach out to Cook Brothers and to 5 Star. The cost share.
Does that lower their fire insurance? By having a looped road?
Who came to you with that request to begin with? Was that just us, or was that one of those two?
Well, it was both. It was some of the homeowners in Chattooga because of all the traffic coming through going to the 5 Star. But we also see the need of it also for double access for any type of storm damage sinkholes that may occur.
We got Steve up here.
Yes, Steve.
Is this absolutely required? Or could you provide documentation, pictures as to why this has to be done?
No, it is not absolutely required. That's why we're not just jumping into doing anything. We're doing our due diligence and making sure, you know, everybody's contacted, everybody knows what's going on. That is something that PSAC did make a recommendation on.
So why would we want to spend $175,000 to put another road in if you already have roads?
It's an extension, and we're looking at the safety purpose. You know, we've been talking with the fire department, we've been talking with everyone involved, and we're not saying that's absolutely what we're gonna do. But we've got it below the line, that way y'all know that it could come up.
Could you at least send me a drawing as to what you're talking about doing for $175,000?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Now, this is only 30 or 40 feet? of
No.
road?
I think it's 300 and,
I thought this is just from the dog park through, right? The old dog park?
yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, all right.
Yeah.
Primary emphasis on doing this was, as coming out of the PSAC, was safety, because the fire department has told us that with those 34 additional homes in there, that if fire departments and ambulance, whatnot, come in there to the 5-star, then everything's dead back there. It is a cluster. And so they have asked for us to look into it, because if there's a fire back there, can't get in there, then everything back there is just gonna burn to the ground. So it's primarily more of a safety thing, and the people over in Chattooga are worried about the increase in traffic from not only 5-star 2 facilities that they have now, this community back there, and they're very concerned about the amount of traffic that's gonna be on Chattooga Drive with only one entrance into that neighborhood. More concerned about the delayed response time and getting the ambulance and fire trucks back there if they only have one entrance.
And takeaways from Public Works is road maintenance. If we're not maintaining the roads, it doesn't matter. We have fires, you can't get there. If you got water and sewer problems, you can't get there. Doesn't matter what kind of amenities we got, if you can't get there, it doesn't matter. So, any other questions before we move on to building maintenance? On this one, the first slide, we've got the comparative financial analysis. Got 15 full-time team members with 1 seasonal. We have the annual GIS fee. More money for, small tools, and that covers a wide range of things. Next, we have the maintenance of the buildings. We've got flooring and painting and HVAC repairs, chemical building, and then we have our energy efficiency programs.
Clayton?
Yes, sir.
Now go back to that chart on, couldn't get this fast enough, you were moving on. Going back to that road maintenance chart.
Okay.
I asked the PSAC if they would take a look at it with Jeff. If you look at that chart there in year, I can't even read it, it's so small. But there's about every 5 years, you see there's only one activity in that year. I've asked them to take a look to see if they couldn't normalize this chart somewhat, given either projected use of HA5 or something, because you see there, we go, and then all of a sudden, in 1 year, you got just one activity. And then you go out 5 more years, you got one activity. Go out 5 more years, you got one activity. There all just seems to be some way that they could normalize that we would spread that out so that we wouldn't have like $5 million in 1 year. I just asked you to take a look at that, and I've asked the PSAC in our last leadership meeting to take a look at that.
We have looked at Mr. Hofer. That's probably not the last spreadsheet. I didn't think you could see it well enough to tell that what's in there.
Yeah.
I have another spreadsheet that's the accurate one.
Okay.
And it is more spread out. Now, there is a year that we'll call catch-up reserves, but yeah, everything kind of runs like 1.4 million.
Because I know that this is primarily for this budget year, but we're also looking in the out years. So I'd like for you to take a look at that. It just doesn't seem right to have every 5 years, we only got one thing going on, and the other years we got 5, 6, or 7 things. Okay.
I'd like to see that too.
So this is back to, maintenance on the buildings. Then we got landscaping, horticulture, chemicals, landscape supplies, irrigation supplies for common property. Contract labor for fire extinguishers, that's yearly, and our HVAC maintenance contract. On this capital, we have in here replacement of a truck and a mower replacement and HVAC replacement.
Kevin, what's the threshold for capital? I thought it was 5,000.
It is.
Any questions before we move on from that?
This begins our docks, RVs, and the gas dock part of the budget request. This is the docks portion under the comparative financial analysis. This would be the RV portion. And here is the gas docks portion. This is our lease rate increased as built in right now, the 3% rate increase recommended in the docks and RVs. I work closely with the MAC committee there with the Marine Advisory, and work closely with them, and they have expressed some concerns that will be taken before Parker. If Parker, would you like to mention anything on that?
Well, yeah, the question that the Marine Advisory Committee has raised is whether or not, if I understand it, whether or not these dock rates need to be increased 3%. They've proposed holding rates level, that is no increase for current lessees, and charging a sort of an add-on fee for new lessees, which would be directed to the dock reserve fund, as I understand it, for construction of new docks. I think there's 2 or 3 issues that come up here. First off, I'd like for the Finance Advisory Committee to take this on fairly quickly as a project for analysis, certainly with staff help. To my knowledge, it would be the first time, at least in my tenure, that there has been proposed a separate fee schedule for new lessees versus current lessees. That is a tiered structure. Now, we have had some changes in dock occupancy rates over the last several years, so we do now have a waiting list, as I understand it, and demand for more docks. But whether that's the right solution or not, I personally have some reservations and concerns. I'd like for the Finance Committee to take a look at that. Now, the other part of that we've had this discussion before, similar discussions, maybe not exactly this one, that deals with the issue of whether the docks P&L is fully loaded for all of the resources that are committed to docks. Among those things, we're not currently charging any land lease for the TRDA lease to docks, even though arguably that waterfront property is among the most valuable common property that we have. So the P&L may not be fully loaded and fully reflective of that. Dock lessees have enjoyed relatively low rates for a long period of time. Now, there was one, forget the name of it, there was one local development that was cited as having lower lease rates than we do. But I think that's kind of a special case that we may need to look at. My understanding is they only have a handful of docks available at that rate. The problem with enjoying low, and for many years, I think it was 8 or 9 years, maybe longer, there was no increase in dock rental rates. It's only been within the last 2 or maybe 3 years that we've had relatively modest 3% increases in dock rates. Now, lessees enjoy that benefit have enjoyed that benefit for a long period of time, but an unanswered question is whether or not those lease rates are adequate to support new construction if we were to add on to the number of dock spaces. Are we or are we not at reinvestment economics? So that's an unanswered question right now. We need to take a look at the capital proposal that is being put forth and see whether or not the current rates are adequate to justify that investment. And then the issue of funding. Traditionally, we have put money into the dock reserve funds, and that dock reserve has paid for new capital projects. That is, the concept being that dock lessees pay for dock capital. With the wave attenuator, which I don't currently know what exactly the status of that and whether we have a firm, I don't think we have a firm quote on the cost of the wave attenuator. The last time I looked at it, the wave attenuator would soak up not all, but much of the dock reserve fund, leaving not enough money in there to do both the wave attenuator and new docks. So how we would fund that is a bit of an unknown. We need to take a look at both the dock reserve fund and the reinvestment economics and the rate structure to come back with a credible recommendation. And I'd like to suggest that the Finance Advisory Committee take that on as a project quickly.
Sorry.
Question over here. I got the microphone. I'd be happy to work with you guys on this. Just some of the numbers that you're going to be looking at is that this year there were 19 slips out of all the slips on all the docks, A through T. There were 19 that gave up their leases and were immediately filled by people on the wait list. And currently there are 50 more on the wait list. Huh? 50 more on the wait list waiting to get a slip in Tellico Village. So that's a grand total of 69 as of right now. Last year we proposed that we put in a dock, wave attenuator came up, et cetera, et cetera. We did increase slip fees last year for all lessees, including kayak, personal watercraft, and boat slips, 5%. For the sole purpose of funding the dock reserve to replace or add a dock and or fund the wave attenuator. I requested some information a couple of months ago, and just to show you what's going on, this is the difference between the Tellico Village property owners paying for their slip fees and allocating that total amount back to the dock reserves. From 2014 until 2020, we have collected $909,857.15 from slip lessees. It's almost $1 million. We now have 50 people waiting to get a slip that would generate, a 32 slip would generate $26,272 a year in revenue. TVA says we can have them, and for some reason we're not wanting to pull the trigger on helping these POA residents put a boat where they could put a boat, because we don't have any openings, and/or anybody that takes a tour into Tellico Village saying, we want to get into boating, well, you've got, well, let's see, we've already waited 2 years for this, so you got at least another year to wait. So my point is, I would love to work with the Finance Committee to resolve this issue. My proposal would be, we need to seriously look at putting additional slips in Tellico Village and adjusting the allocation of the dock reserves. If the POA is going to insist that dock reserves pay, then we need to go back and look at where that money's been allocated in the past, because the money is there.
Here you go, Rick.
I've got a number of questions. Number one, last year we allocated more of the dock revenues to reserves, correct? It's 30% of the dock revenues, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Secondly, where is the competitive data, survey data for dock prices in the area?
We don't have it down on the spreadsheet. We do have the data, though.
I'd like to see it. Thirdly, we commissioned Jacobs to do a study of the wave attenuators at both the Yacht Club and the Tanasi Basin. What is the outcome of that?
We have not started that yet. They can't give us a hard date to start it.
Can't hear. Can't hear you.
Because of the quarantine in New York, they won't come out and have to go back and quarantine for 2 weeks. And
So-
yes, it's the only resource that we want to use from Jacobs. It's the only area that are the most expertise. We could pull a group together out of Jacobs from Dallas, but it's not their number one group.
Okay, so basically what we're saying is we're going to put $220,000 into the budget for a wave attenuator that we said was in imminent danger of failure last year, and we put 220 in. And oh, by the way, we know nothing.
I don't think we said it was imminent. We told you we thought it would make it another season, and it has. It has had some problems. It lost.
Actually, that's not what you told us. You told us it could catastrophically fail at any time.
Well, sure, depending on what kind of storm come through.
So basically, we're to take it on faith that we need to put this money in the budget, when last year we took it on faith and we did, and guess what? We're in the same spot right now. I don't know.
And the docks were not the only thing that we sacrificed. We sacrificed, well, it's one sense, we sacrificed the boat line. I just reiterated that the docks were not the only thing we sacrificed for the wave attenuator that we've done nothing about. The boat launch was also sacrificed, which keeps reappearing and reappearing and reappearing and then getting put below the line on the budget. So I'd like to see that come back up with the docks.
Thank you, Pat. From the PSAC's perspective, we went into this last year after the budget looking at $220,000 to replace the wave attenuator. Didn't do a study, but we got 4 different estimates from 4 different companies telling us all how they were going to do it, and they were all different. So the PSAC said and recommended to Public Works, they wouldn't recommend any of these 4 contracts. They recommended that they do a study, because if you repaired it, they didn't know what was underwater because nobody had been underwater at that point. So if we repaired it, they could have all been for naught. And so the PSAC said they would not recommend any of these because none of these people would stand anything that they did. They would not stand up to it because of the fact that nobody knew what was underwater. And that's what we're waiting on, is this guy from New York that comes down apparently and tells us, yep, you can repair it, and you could repair it for less than $100,000. No, you need to replace the whole thing. So that's where we are. And so until that study is done, whatever you want to do, I guess the Public Works would do it, but you might be throwing good money after bad. We're looking for Jacobs Engineering, and he is the main guy that does this kind of stuff. All the local guys that we've tried, they don't do this kind of work. So Jacobs, which is a local engineering firm that we use for a lot of things, they've looked into it. This is the guy that they've recommended. As Jeff just said, they also have a guy out in Dallas will come in here, but he is not their main guy for doing this kind of work. The guy in Dallas, he's probably qualified, but not fully qualified for what we need.
The issue with the guy out of Dallas is he has to put together a team to help him do that. The team the person out of New York has his team already. So there'd be different people not on one team with the guy out of Dallas, and I just don't think we'll get a good job if we don't have the professionals look at it.
And just a reminder, this issue has already come to Finance Committee once and raised some of these same questions. So we've had, I don't know, a few months to mull over this, but unfortunately, no break in the logjam up north to be able to get the right people in to evaluate it.
Jeff, what would happen if you did have this break loose? What would we do? What's the plan?
We would have to secure it, but then we would lose the effectiveness of a breakwater in that basin.
So you'd be years out from what you're telling me to get it repaired?
No, not years. I mean, we would have to wait till they come down and tell us if it was salvageable, and then, make the repairs and reposition it or build a new.
I think Mr. Hofer has a question. Go ahead, Mr. Hofer.
I'd just like to jump in here for a second too to support this idea that obviously the wave attenuator is in the panels, the steel panels towards the channel side are in bad shape. We know that. The problem here is that you've got expertise on the FAC committee, and several of us have looked at that, including myself. No one else wants to stand behind a recommendation. We need to know what to do on that particular wave attenuator. And while we're at it, Jeff has added looking at the one at Tenasseee, which makes sense because, when you're going to have this team come out here, you might as well spend the extra money and know what you have over there as well, because that's a wooden structure as opposed to the one at the yacht club, which is a steel structure. So the bottom line is we know something has to be done. As Bruce mentioned, some quotes came in and we look at those, and none of these contractors will stand behind their work and say, if we do this, this will last X number of more years. So we ultimately, as a community, should, in good conscience, do an engineering study. COVID screwed us up on this, and we have tried every which way, Jeff has, and Clayton, I'll give him credit for that, to put together a team to get them out here. So some dollars really need to remain in that budget. The worst case scenario we could come up with is if this engineering firm comes in and says, folks, it's beyond repair. It's going to cost more than $220,000. That's just a given, but we don't know that. And we until we have a study by professionals, we won't know what to do. So I think that's the long and the short of it. We've gone as far as we can with this thing, and trust me, we have spent a lot of time going through this in PSAC, and we just we're at this crux position here where we need to know what to do. So that's it. That was my input, and I appreciate it.
Go ahead, Steve.
Okay, I got about 3 items. Let's stay on the wave attenuator. First comment I'd make is I find it hard to believe there's not another firm in the United States, whether it be Florida, Texas, wherever, that we could get someone in here to give us an answer on the wave attenuator. And I'm sure PSAC's looked at everything, but why are we sticking with Jacobs? Let's go find something else that could handle the project. With regard to the issue about not being able to afford the docks, I fully support what Pat's talking about. We need to put docks in. How do you pay for it out of the reserves? Well, if you take a look at the wave attenuator of 220,000, why is that coming out of the dock reserve? Why isn't that coming out of general R&M reserve? Because it sure as hell protects a whole lot of other things besides the docks. And the last item, I agree with Carla. We need to move the Kahiti. I call it the boat ramp, boat launch, whatever it is. That needs to be above the line. We need to figure out how to get that done. But to continually sit here and say, well, Jacobs can't come for the quarantine. There are other firms, I'm sure, in the United States and the world that can come in and take care of this project for us.
Steve, I disagree with you on moving that into the general fund. Reason why is that it's primarily to save the docks and to save the boats in the docks. So it's not for protecting the golf course, it's not for protecting the wreck, it's the boats and it's the docks. And so, you know, that is not just a wave attenuator, it is a dock.
It also is there to protect the asset of the docks that DOA owns from snapping those.
I can't hear Pat.
Well, my point was that the wave attenuator obviously is to protect the boats from bouncing around in the slip, but it's much more than that. It protects those anchors and the cables and the docks from lifting up and slamming into each other and breaking away, as we had in-dock float away, I think it was last winter. My boat decided it was going over to Wind River, but it hung on. No, I didn't either. So that wave attenuator not only protects our asset, the dock, but it also protects, if you look at Tanasi and you look at the yacht club, they're both bordered on three sides by the lake. And you've got that wash that comes in from that constant beating of that wake, and that's protecting our asset, our property from eroding. And it also protects, if you go to Google and you look at the map, there's also a lot of real high dollar value homes along that waterfront in Tanasi and here at the yacht club, and it's there to protect them. So it's just not a bunch of boaters that want to keep your little boats from rocking along, so you need a wave attenuator. It is to protect valuable POA assets. Oh, Bruce left, so let's change subjects quickly.
Okay. Now, one last point, Pat. POA has historically defined their reserves by docks, maintenance, etc. With a reserve fund study, in reality, we have one large reserve that needs to be monitored and used for the purposes of maintaining and supporting Tellico Village assets, both here and over in Monroe County.
Chad, we have one more related to docks from YouTube. They would like to know and have looked into the disproportionated fees being charged for kayak slips that inhibit 7 boat slips, but combined provide a much higher amount of revenue.
That's something else we're gonna look at too, isn't it, Parker, with the increase?
Yeah, we will, but my recollection is that we set those fees in part based on the investment that was required up front to build those kayak racks. So it's not just a matter of they're taking up some space that otherwise would be leased as boat slips. It was a repayment of the upfront investment required at the time we built the storage racks.
Yeah, and what I'd like to address that too, and again, I would really like to work with finance on this, but the initial investment, granted, it costs us a lot of money to take those slips, convert them to kayak storage, build them up, and put a lot of kayaks in there, and we did that. And everybody in Tellico Village that uses that or uses the water, thanks you very much, and all the past board members and finance members. Take the number in finance, when you're doing this study, take the number of slips that are being leased at $300, multiply those two together and see how much money you're generating. And then take a kayak for $1,000, no, let's go $2,000, at $300 a year, and let's go 3 years, you're totaling the kayak. It ain't worth jack anymore. So you take a $40,000 pontoon boat and you charge $800 a year, divide that into 40,000, you see the disparity there? You take a $20,000 personal watercraft, I just got one, and you put it on a slip and you lease it for $300 a year, divide that 300 into that 20,000, it's worth it. But who the heck wants a kayak that you're gonna total in 3 years because of a slip fee? Granted, we did the right thing by charging to put them in there, but to go up again for a kayak for 3% a year is pricing yourself out of business.
And yet they're full occupancy.
Yes, they are. Everything you have is 100% full. There are 50 people waiting and 19 replaced.
Yeah, I'd suggest we move on from docks and this discussion. I recommend the Finance Committee take this on as a project and subject it to further study and analysis. And if that's, and it appears that Mr. White would like to be a part of that discussion.
I'll work with Pat on it, Parker. I'll work with it.
Thank you.
Parker, speaking for myself, I agree with you. The Finance Committee will take this on.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, moving into our storage. This is a comparative for the local rates, as seen through this slide here. Volunteer storage, American self-storage, and you store it. If you compare that back to ours, we are secure, in our secure RV storage, we are $271 per year, and the unsecure area is $170 per year. This is our maintenance of docks line item, which I work directly out of whenever I'm trying to do the work and working alongside with these, the MAC and trying to work with these docks and keep things going. Our general maintenance is at $36,000 for a request for the year. Anchor replacement at $40,000. See, the bumper and the board replacements, $15,000, and then Tenacity Kahiti lighting program, which will continue our lighting program that we have started in the Yacht Club Basin. We're going to try to continue with that LED change out for energy efficiency and changing those lightings over. So that is $20,000 in there for that. This is our capital for the docks. When I met with the MAC about the capital request, we talked about as a team on where we should, basically, as you see on these numbers, where we should basically line these out, 1 through 4 on where we should be at. Now, of course, as we've been talking about, the wave attenuator is in there. The new slips, which is basically the first priority. The 32 slips in the Tenacity Basin. Kahiti Dock Entrance Road and Parking Lot. That is a very important thing for our Kahiti patrons. We've had a gravel or a chip and seal parking area for years there. That's kind of rough, and so we would like to have that area paved, the entrance road and the parking lot. And then, of course, then the 10 additional jet ski slips, which would be a revenue generator that would bring more revenue into our jet ski, the PWC slips there. And the additional ones, some of those can go into the area I have made here at GDOC. With the new style of the PWC slips, they're actually a shade narrower than the older slips. And so when I put in the new ones here at the gas dock, the GDOC, I was able to move those out and tie those in, allowing a little bit more room there. So I believe we can gain some there, and then we can probably add additional at Kahiti, and then we'll have to look into any areas out here in the Tenasseee Basin for, it'll just kind of be a pick and choose and try to fit those additional ones in. So just in areas that we can keep safe and add on to where we're already at. Also, there's another line item there for the 10 replacements, and as these jet ski, these PWC slips age and these older styles, the newer styles actually accommodate the newer PWCs better than the older style jet ski slip. And so those are for 10 replacements as we done in 2020 too, and then you can see the replacements in the out years there too as well.
And those would be for the same number indicated here? So like, if we look at the number one with 32 slips, that's to do a full 32, and then in 2023, there's more money? Would that be to do?
That would be
additionals
another
again?
dock, yes, sir. Another dock, yes, sir.
Another dock, okay.
Yep, in that same area, which would actually include moving out the breakwater dock a little bit. That's why the number's substantially
But
larger.
it'd be 32 per increment, that's not over the 10-year plan.
Is that what is
32 in the first year? Per, okay, thank you.
So may I bring up something too?
Yes, sir.
Again, 2020 was the first year this occurred, and I want to bring this up to the Marina Advisory Committee, and particularly a guy on there by the name of Bruce Dillingham, which we all associate that name with dog park. Bruce would appreciate the humor. But up till 2020, we've been taking those 10 jet ski slips and discarding them, correct?
Mhm.
And he put them on Craigslist this year and made us money. I think he got $5,000 for them. So the 20 could actually be 15 if we turn them over to Mr. Dillingham, let him do his magic.
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you.
I have a question on Kahiti. The road that comes in there right now, it's dusty and it's rough, but that's, long-term, that's not the entrance to the docks that's on the plan, it's,
That is the entrance to the docks that's on the plan. Well, depending on what plan you're looking at.
Okay.
Got it.
how many are there?
But if you're looking at the plan, the master plan for boat docks, it is the entrance road
Because the other one comes in.
through a proposed townhouse there.
Okay, and there's no, I don't think there's any plans to do the townhouses or anything in the near future by the time that road is shot, though. So, okay, that's why I just want to make sure, long-term, we're just borrowing that space right
That
now.
will take some water trucks on.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, sir. Have any more questions before we proceed? Okay, this is for the gas dock capital, and in the 2021 budget, we are proposing a new fuel management system for our current gas dock. This is something that I have been working on as far as getting this pricing in for a new wireless system that will basically work off of signal, and it's supposed to be so much better. It's actually a product that Wind River is using currently. And RBM is the company that I had to do the proposal. It's called a Fuel Force, and it would be basically wireless fuel management system. Hopefully cutting out all the problems that we've had in the past with the existing landlines and things that we've had to replace, and the connection that we have with our computer at our office that dials into the fuel management system currently that we have issues with sometimes. So hopefully this would solve all those issues that we've had in the past. And then if you look into the out years, there's a fuel dispenser and replacement piping as well.
Any questions? Any other questions before we move on? Okay. Here's a comparative financial analysis for ACC. Moving on. This shows us our team members. The board just recently approved 2 additional code enforcement staff employees, which are in place. Those were very much needed. We have in here, the board talked to me about, we had talked about 5, we wanted to do to 2, and then, first of the year or something, we'll look, see what we need, see if we need 1 more, see if we need 2 more, see if we need 3. So we agreed that we would, look at that, see how many we needed. We wouldn't go out and just hire 3 more. We may hire 1, we may hire 2, whatever we needed to do. So we've put these 3 in here and 1 additional employee in the office to help Holly with all the permitting going on and with all the codes guys out there. We are already seeing where these guys are catching more unpermitted jobs right now. So this has increased Holly's workload tremendous, and it will continue to increase it. So we have that 1 additional person in there for her too.
I have a question for you.
Yes, ma'am.
So my only concern about the extra admin as a permanent extra admin, if we're saying that we know that the numbers are going up, but in a couple of years they're gonna go back down again. Are we certain we want yet another permanent admin head count?
I don't think admin will go down. I think we will constantly be doing letters and admin stuff addressing permitting. We will get to the point that we're not permitting as many new homes, but we're doing total renovations. And with all these codes guys out there looking for non-compliance and looking for unpermitted jobs, there will be a lot of work for those to do. I really don't feel that Holly could keep up with it by herself.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
There was, I don't know whether this is exactly the right time or place to ask this, but there was, going back to the board guidance, one of the points that was made back on that August 19th meeting was to ensure, at least attempt to ensure, that ACC permit fees are adequate to cover cost of additional staff, trucks, and equipment to do the additional work. Well, if you look at the P&L from that, it was the slide right before that, the 2020 budget had positive net income of $74,000. Projection at this moment for 21 is a negative 116. So there's a change, unfavorable change or variance of $190,000. Now that translates directly into the 6 people and the equipment that it takes to support them. But there are no changes to this moment in ACC fees charged. And I don't know that it's even possible to raise fees enough to cover that additional cost. I mean, that would require, well, the revenue for ACC permits, $274,000. I mean, you'd need to go up 2/3 probably in your fee rates to recoup enough money to cover the cost increase. So I don't know what the resolution needs to be on this, but the board directive or guideline, at least as it currently stands, is probably not feasible. I don't know how to bridge that gap.
But isn't this a case where we're again conservative with our revenue assumption?
We are in terms of the number of new home permits,
Right.
and maybe to some extent the number of miscellaneous
rehabs,
permits.
yeah.
So
Well,
we can adjust and recoup some of that, but I still don't think it'll be enough.
'Cause
And
I'm
that was
looking
also
like
my-
in 19, it was $400,000 of actual revenue. And, you know, what are we running year-to-date in 20 would be a good question.
I don't have that in front of me, correct?
But it's higher, than probably than what we're reflecting the $300,000 run rate.
Well, we're currently behind versus budget on that front, like miscellaneous permits.
Okay, but new home starts themselves are up.
New home starts are up, but that really comes into play like with final inspections and kind of sign off on that. When we did the justification for the 2 incremental head count for 2020, I think we said it was about a little less than a 6% improvement that you'll probably see in the number of these, you know, people that aren't permitted. So that volume should go up a little bit, but even so, you know, you're looking at about $17,000 in revenue. And to Parker's point, that break even, I don't know if you'll ever get there, but again, it's almost an enforcement question with the revised Blue Book and wanting to ensure that everyone's kind of abiding by the rules in the village. It's going to take additional staff to do that at the level that I think people are expecting.
And that's speaking to the comment that I want to make. You're going to make the assumption that the way we were doing it before we added those 2 and requested that you look for the 3 more was correct. And the board was explaining that the number of, let's see, what do you call those things? Appeals processes, requests for, turn down, delays, complaints, problems, water runoff, drainage. I think we even had a couple of lawsuits in there. That if we consider that was the correct way of running this POA, or having 170 houses that we're building and the correct number of inspectors out, then you can say, yeah, we have a shortfall, but my question would be, is that shortfall correct versus the way we need to manage this village? To the point you just made.
Thank you.
Right, and that will.
Otherwise, we're basically gonna stop construction in the village.
Well, yeah, I'm not suggesting that we just blindly raise fees to the point that you reach this break even, but to point out that it would be difficult, if not impossible, if that was truly the board's directive, I don't think we stand much of a chance of meeting that. Now, whether it's the right thing to do or not, so far as enforcement of codes village-wide and maintenance of property values and all of those secondary benefits, yeah, it probably is justified, and on that basis, not on the basis of fee collection.
And to that point, I think that because I'm guessing that a lot of these code violations are miscellaneous permits that don't necessarily have a fee attached to them, raising fees are not going to really impact that unless we attach fees to things that haven't historically required a fee to get a permit.
Well, they have fees, but they're not very large. I mean, it's
Okay.
more the issue of
So
whether or not it's permitted.
every miscellaneous permit now has a fee attached?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Speak to that.
Okay. So secondly, just kind of a side note as far as expenses going up on people enforcing codes and stuff, have you, with the new HelpSpot technology, have you had more code violations reported through that? Or are those typically other types of requests?
We are having some reporting on that, yes, ma'am.
So those result in potentially charging fees for permits in those cases, or how do you handle that?
It is. Those guys are going out, responding to those help ticket calls and finding out what's going on. Those are jobs that need to be permitted. They're having them come in, do a miscellaneous permit, and collecting the permitting fee.
Okay, thank you.
Miscellaneous permit fee, at least what was in the 20 budget, was $50 for the initial application. Now, larger projects, like if you're adding a room onto the house or, something of that nature, they're figured on I think on a percentage of the value of the project. But, just a small project, small permit is $50, and whether that's enough or not, I don't know. The lower it is, the more likely you are to get people to comply. The higher it is, the more likely you are to have people try to avoid it and just do it without asking.
I was basing my comment on past experience where I've gotten miscellaneous permits that did not have a fee attached. So apparently I missed the fact that now every single miscellaneous permit has a fee attached.
No, ma'am, under $1,000 is free. You have to get a permit, but it's free, anything under $1,000.
Okay, so that could still be the case in codes enforcement violations, right? I'm just saying that there are potentially some enforcement violations where people have to get them permitted based on whether they're turned in or whether they're discovered by the codes enforcement staff members that would result in something that doesn't necessarily generate any revenue.
Correct.
Okay.
Generates extra work for the office and for the inspectors.
And that was my point, saying it was, all I was doing is basically saying to Parker's point that those types of things aren't going to help the board directive to cover the cost of these people based, you know, on some of those permits actually being $0.
And then we have PC replacement and then maintenance for trucks. Yes, Steve?
Is there a capital forecast for the ACC? Because I'm assuming you're going to buy 3 more trucks because you're adding 3 more code enforcers.
Yeah, yes, that was supposed to be in there. I apologize that is left out. I'll make sure Kevin gets that in there for you all.
So last year you had a replacement of 45,000 for trucks. So should I assume that 45 plus 3 more trucks at 30,000?
No.
We need to look at that. We'll have to look at what the capital says. I know we've changed KCC around that.
I've got 100,000 in the month of March under ACC capital for new trucks.
Yeah, that's correct.
And I know this question has been asked before. What are the tools of the trade of these inspectors? What do they carry with them?
The tools, well, they all have, you know, phones. They have Surface Pros where they can document their job site inspections and taking pictures and where they can access what the home is supposed to be to where they can look at all those things. So that's the equipment that they use.
Okay, because I know it was asked before that instead of a pickup truck, you could buy a Corolla for, maybe not half the cost. It gets a lot better gas mileage. So just something to consider. I know the guys, I like to drive a pickup too, but I can't justify a pickup, a 4-wheel drive pickup alone, because how often do they go off-road? Probably never. So just a question.
Okay. Any other questions?
Capital for ACC, it will be in the consolidation summaries Wednesday. It's in there right now. We just failed to include it in this packet today.
Thank you all.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Forget that we have to trace down the mic. Last year, basically what we had asked for was a projection, a bar chart that shows over a 10-year time what the cost to run this village is. And I assume that you're going to do that again this year. And it basically showed last year that on a straight line almost that it cost year over year about the same with inflation. Have you looked at this budget that Public Works has put out and compared it to their 10-year breakdown?
To answer your question, Bruce, yes. I'm just about to finalize that histogram. I should have it done tonight, so it'll certainly be done in time for the board presentation. And you're exactly right. What Parker talked about at the kickoff of the meeting today was on maintenance. We're basically, you know, there's always puts and takes of priorities, but in the aggregate, we're almost spot on for the last 20 years. And the same thing with program delivery and admin. So I'm just waiting for the numbers to kind of obviously
I think it would be good if we could see that up, because for us to sit here and listen to the just example of the $3,000 to change oil, I mean, it's like, okay, you know, how does that compare to last year? How does that compare year over year? How does it compare year over year for us to run this village? And then if you show us up front that there's a straight line going there to maintain this village, is basically what they're basing their budget on. If we got to that point and then all of a sudden this year it's jumped up 15%, we say, whoa, you know, we say,
No,
whoa. Yeah, tell us where that 15% came from versus the normal 3%.
Understood. It was more hours in my day, and I will tell you, Parker has mentioned many times, the growth of cost in the village is directly correlated to the growth of the village itself. So as we're adding homes at a faster rate.
But that doesn't hold true with the trend that we saw last year. Trend last year showed almost a straight line, just about at 3% a year. And I know that from the time I've moved here till the time now, we've had a whole lot more houses added, but our expenses hasn't grown appreciably with that. It's gone up only like 3% to maintain this village. So something's wrong with that theory there.
Not necessarily. I mean, as we make investments in technology, we do continuous improvement. I would expect to leverage some of those fixed costs. And I would argue that there is a lot in this village to maintain the village that is inherently either a step variable or fixed cost. So we're constantly pushing the envelope of how can we save money to offset that natural trend.
And that the board is grateful for. I'm just saying that I think that I could challenge the PSAC, I could challenge the FAC, I could challenge, we don't know enough for these numbers. What we need to see are trends. And if the trend is that this year you guys are thinking the cost is going to be 20–25% greater than it was last year, okay, show us where the exceptions are.
In total, Bruce, we're nowhere near that.
Well,
And my recollection from the maintenance study done, it's probably been 3 years ago now, the correlation was extraordinarily tight, that inflation rate plus the growth rate equaled growth in cost. And that held true for maintenance, and it held true for cost overall. The long-term trend was more like 4%, not 3%. And in high growth times, as we've been in the last couple of years, you should expect that costs will go up a bit faster as the village grows faster than, say, 3%. So we'll have some trend projections. We'll have the histogram for you. I'm not going to, I mean, we may have it by Wednesday. Certainly we'll have it by the board review. But you're not seeing growth in cost overall go up by, you know, any extraordinary amounts. Individual departments like ACC, yes, but there's a reason and there's an explanation for that.
Am I the only one that needs to see the exceptions? I'd like to, you know, you sit here and you go tools, 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 you go study, study, study. I'd like to see year over year what your cost is, and are we way out of line with what it's been in the past? Because if it's way out of line, I want to know why.
That's exactly right, Bruce. That basically is in line with the question that I asked earlier. So we need more context behind these numbers, not just here's what the budget is for 2021.
So, you know, sooner the better that you can get that trend to us.
We'll work toward that goal.
Bruce, just to piggyback, it'd be sweet to see 2018, 2019 actuals, 2020 year to date, and what you're proposing for 2021.
I agree, Steve.
Thank you all.
Let me just comment, I would hope that others would be in agreement with me. This was the first time that Chad and Clayton have done the budget presentations, And I think for their first time out of the starting blocks, this was an extraordinarily good set of presentations, and I very much appreciate that. Okay, next up is food service, and we've got Mitzi Lane and Andy Fox presenting.
Thank you. Actually, I've got to give a little bit of thank yous to also Jeff and Beth and Chad and Clayton for helping us with this food service division. As you all know, there's a lot of moving parts and pieces to food service. It's not just what Andy does with food relations, it's also the building maintenance and things of that nature. So I actually need to thank them as well. Also Kevin Ellsworth for the financial analysis that you all probably have seen that the Public Works Division did, as well as what's in these food service slides. You'll see that they are consistent, and that's because Kevin Ellsworth has helped the entire management team with our financial analysis this year, and I thank him for that. So we'll move right along. The very first slide I want you to look at is Tokwa Food Service. The way I would like to do this today is I'll go through the clubhouses, we'll look at the yacht club, we'll talk about the activity centers, and then at the very end of the slides, I've pulled together a consolidation of the entire division so that you can see what we're proposing for our 2021 budget. But things to take note in the Tokwa Food Service is you'll notice in our operating supplies, what we had budgeted, the 2020 budget versus this year, that number has gone down. And that's just because of the need, what supplies Andy is looking for. We are looking for about $12,000 worth of various kitchen equipment items that he'll be coming to as far as next year goes. 3 fly fans, that's the value of $2,100. That's in that operating supply number, as well as some additional tables and chairs at the outside pavilion. So that's a number that has actually decreased, but if you look at our net income, we are looking at a loss of $228,000, which is $17,000 better than what we had budgeted for this year.
I have a question before you get off that. I think I know the answer, but it's more to Kevin. The depreciation, that huge jump is the new clubhouse. And you also see a big jump, I assume, then, same line item for golf?
Yes, all the areas. I can run out of our current general ledger, out of the fixed asset system, a projection for next year by month of depreciation for all the assets that are currently on the books. So every model has been updated to reflect that, and then any new capital that they've requested will also flow through once it's capitalized through depreciation.
Yeah. So on that, it's a non-cash item, but on your P&L, it gets hit with that depreciation.
Yes, that's
in
good to
every
point
one
out.
of them. Yep, I talked with Kevin about that last week. Moving on into Tenasseee, kind of the same budget as what we had last year. We didn't see a huge increase. You'll see there's a $2,000 difference year over year in our budgets. $2,200 of that is some Centos cleaning if you look at the operating supplies, and that's just about the $2,000 increase that you've seen. We did increase operating supplies as far as the sanitation and things of that nature due to COVID in other areas, but it seemed that Tenasseee had the larger increase. Looking into the Kahidi proposed budget, you'll see there that we are actually looking better than 2020 at about $7,000. There were not a huge amount of anomalies there. The next slide will actually dig in a little bit to some of the specific requests that we're bringing to the Finance Committee and the board this year at Kahidi. We would have the $10,000 number that's been in there. That's nothing new. A lot of times the equipment there that needs replaced is of course less than $5,000, and so we just keep a consistent amount in there every year. We would only use that as needed. There's some outside chair replacements that I've been approached by some of the Kahidi Food Service Committee that Andy has there. And we all agree there are some new pieces that are needed due to the new portico that's out there, and it just kind of is an eyesore when you have old chairs and a new facility. We also have that replace the brass and hardware on all the doors. That's a project that we've worked on, started about 2 years ago in all the facilities. That came from a continuous improvement project that was the first impression. And you'll notice in red, we actually split that between recreation and golf because there are 3 different divisions out of that same building. Yes.
On Mike. The question was asked on the PSAC, on the utility expense for Kahiti, with the new radiant heaters that we're putting in, do the utility costs reflect that? Do we know? Have we ventured to guess as to what that's going to be?
Correct. We did include that increase in the utility.
Okay.
So we'll move on to the Kahiti Community Center. There again, there's not a huge change as far as our operating supplies and expenses that we had budgeted. Kevin did put the depreciation in there, and of course that's where you're going to see that variance of about $28,000 on that building, which is what you just asked earlier, Jeff. Thank you for that. Let's go on to the Yacht Club. If you look there, bottom line net income, I know a lot of people look at that first thing. We're actually budgeting $40,000 better than what the 2020 budget was. The Yacht Club management fee, that's another hot topic that people like to address. And of course, I've got Andy with me. What we had actually proposed last year in 2020 is that in 2021, there would be a 0 subsidy. At the beginning of this year in 2020, we were on track to do that. Things looked great. Then, of course, COVID hit. And, you know, based on where we are right now, year to date, about a $39,000 overage in that subsidy, and that is, you know, Andy's got all the numbers and has given presentations throughout the year to keep us abreast of where we are. But we did decide to keep the $10,000 in for the 2021 proposed budget. Just coming off the COVID. Now, once you see later on in a few slides, we'll look at our 10-year plan, and we have gone back down to a 0 subsidy beginning in 2022. So we would like to ask that the finance and the board as well consider, you know, a $10,000 subsidy for this coming up year, and then move forward to the 0 subsidy, the management fee that you'll see.
Mitzi, I have a question.
Okay.
And I'm going to really address this to Andy.
Okay.
Is COVID's not over. Yeah, flat out, it's not over, and it's going to extend into next year.
We can't hear you, please get the mic.
As I said, COVID's not over, and it's certainly going to extend into next year. You're projecting a $10,000 subsidy. Can you really hit that? If we continue to have to operate this way, maybe 6 months into next year.
I mean, the positives are that from a catering standpoint, 2021's bookings are solid to put us easily back into 2018 numbers. Is that going to happen? That's, I mean, your guess is as good as mine. So if you want to, you know, if you guys decide as a group that we want to figure that this COVID thing's going to last through next summer and we might lose a bunch of our spring weddings on top, then by all means we can have that conversation. But you know, we're trying to go into this with, you know, the hope and the positivity, because the bookings are there and they're coming in strong. So I guess that's a really a bigger conversation that I guess I can really answer. We're just trying to look at it as positively as we can.
Okay, staying on the Yacht Club, we'll look at the small tools. There again, we've just got some money in there for kitchen equipment. That's nothing new. We typically have that every year. And then we're going to look at replacing patio chairs and tables in the amount of $2,400. As far as the maintenance of building, one of the additional things this year on the next slide, where did it go? There we go. Well, was $6,000 for the window replacements. All right, moving on into the Yacht Club Activity Center. This is something that, if you noticed in revenue, this is new to us. We have never budgeted any revenue in the Yacht Club Activity Center. But as you are all aware, in April of 2018, legislation was passed that would allow the retail sale of alcoholic beverages in Tellico Village. And at that time, the current law required retail sales of alcoholic beverages only in municipalities of a county where sales have been allowed by a local option election or in a civil district of the county in which the district has a population of at least 30,000. So what we did is last year in 2019, sat down with Andy, sat down with Beth, and sat down with a few of the board members actually and talked about what could we do realistically as Tellico Village to be able to utilize what these legislators and Lieutenant Governor had helped us be able to obtain, and we just wanted to be able to provide a service to our property owners. Obviously not looking to make a whole lot of additional revenue, but it would be a way for us to say, okay, thank you to you folks in Nashville who have went to bat for us to, allow us to have this option. So what we are proposing today to you as the Finance Committee and the board members is just a one-year trial. We would like to come in and offer an online alcoholic beverage service to our property owners. It would be a prepaid deal where you go to the Tellico Village website and we have a link to this alcohol order purchase. You go in, you pick out your alcohol, prepay with a credit card, and then one day a week, there again, we would work that out with the vendor that brings our alcohol deliveries, and the distributor would bring it one day a week, and you would show up at the yacht club and pick up your case of wine or your liquor, your favorite liquor, whatever that may be. And it would just be an additional service that we would provide. So we were really, careful when we looked at, okay, the expenses. We don't want to increase a lot. I actually had Parker reach out to our insurance company to obtain this additional or provide this additional service. The insurance will remain the same because we are already insured to have alcohol and sell alcohol from our facilities. There is going to be a $60 a month charge for the online services that we would have to increase. That's a software expense that I have budgeted in there. And then I've worked with Beth on the marketing of this and how we can very inexpensively do that, and again, just provide a service to our residents, and that would be, through Telegram, Channel 3, different avenues, also with the food service marketing that we already have. It would just be something that Andy could say, hey, as a reminder, we now have online liquor sales and wine sales. I won't name any names, but there is a board member in this room that I had lunch with last week, and he actually missed the FedEx guy on a couple of occasions because he was in meetings. And so I used that opportunity to say, hey, you could drive to the yacht club at your convenience and pick up your, your drink. So again, one thing I want you to note is in the net income, if you look at what we budgeted for 2020 versus the 2021 budget, we are still looking at $28,000 favorable net income over last year in 2020. So I want to point that out. It's just, again, a trial that we would like to hopefully let you all allow us to do this and just see where we are. And we can go back to the legislators and back to Lieutenant Governor and said, thank you, we've tried it, and go from there. In the activity center maintenance of building, we've left in about $4,000 on just plumbing repairs as needed. There's nothing specific there, but I wanted to highlight that. That was some of the maintenance that was in there. And so I wanted to wrap it up with the food service division as a total, just to show you year over year. What we are proposing for 2021 is a $40,000 better than the 2020 budget. So we've kind of gone through each department that's within that food service division, but I just kind of wanted you to see what it looks like as far as the entire division. Here is the 10-year plan. I think probably most of you have seen that. You'll notice, as I mentioned before, when you get down to the yacht club management fee, we have 0 subsidy beginning 2022. We'll go right into capital. What we've discussed here, there is $60,000 first floor renovations. There are actually, I think in finance, you all been briefed, and Parker keeps saying that coming soon within the next few weeks, we will be bringing forward recommendations and requests for some renovations to begin this year that we had budgeted this year at the Yacht Club on the first floor. And this 60,000 is just a continuation of that. There would be some bar equipment that needs to be replaced, and water. We're gonna have to move some water lines. There would be a little bit of plumbing on the first floor. The 150,000, the dining level renovations. Then the chairs for the great room, there are 300 of those being proposed to be replaced, and that's a $20,000 capital item. Kahiti equipment, $10,000. Tokwa, the meal overlay and additional parking spaces, $50,000. Shades are being requested for Tokwa. That's a big issue, and that is due to the sun as the evening sun sets in the west. Andy and team over there have really been getting pounded by property owners for those shades.
You recently came to the board for that request. What was that request this year?
That was it. You turned it down, yeah. Tenacity replacement hood in the kitchen, Tenacity walk-in cooler, that's a $15,000 and a $20,000 capital request. So our department total food service capital proposed for 2021 is $340,000. And finally, as a division whole, I keep forgetting I have the slides to click. You'll see the 10-year capital plan. I went to actually Jeff Gagley. He helps build in a lot of these 10-year plans as far as the building goes when it comes to renovations, especially things like parking lots and additional spaces. So I looked ahead into 2026 and noticed that there is a $125,000 number in there for Tenacity Clubhouse building renovation. That is a food service portion of it. So that specifically was a Upland Design Team quote. That's where that number came from. So I just kind of wanted to highlight that. I did ask him this morning, you know, where'd we get that number? And that's where that number came from.
Can I go back to the shades there at Tokwa?
At
Is that for the
Tokwa, yes.
Pavilion, yeah. Was that the pavilion shades or?
It's
Restaurant? Okay.
on the west side,
Have
yes.
you looked yet at shades for use of the pavilion? Still nothing, okay.
Kevin, I have an education question. We only show revenue for Kahiti. Where does the net take place between revenue and expenses for the other restaurants? The question was, Kahiti's the only restaurant that shows revenue. There's obviously a netting in some other line. What is that other line that gets netted between revenue and expenses?
It'd be in the AWE financials. They're not consolidated up to us. That's Andy's sales.
That's the correct number, zero.
It should be zero.
Yes.
And so the subsidy question where we put 10 in for next year and we've got 39 for this year to date,
That's just the yacht club.
just the yacht club, okay? And is this type of subsidy traditionally what it's run at over the years? Three-quarters of a million? Okay.
It's huge. It's been huge.
Okay. That's typical.
Huge is typical. or
Huge
had-
is typical.
Had been typical.
Correct.
Okay.
Since I've been in the village, I've seen that as high as $400,000 in a year for the yacht club alone.
But it's interesting that we compare apples to oranges, because when you say, I feel like that question is just kind of illuminating that we compare apples to oranges when you look at those subsidies, because if you really just look at the net, then those numbers aren't as different as they would lead you to believe.
Steve, you have the floor.
Okay, got a couple of questions. Let's start with Tokwa. when we justified spending that $2.5 million on the restaurant and clubhouse at Tokwa, there was something about a $2,000 a month rental payment from AWE to use our brand-new facilities. Obviously, 2020 kind of changed that around. We gave a year, we had COVID. I don't see any revenue in there for the rent.
Steve, Andy has agreed to begin that in January, and that's just an oversight in my budget, so we'll make sure to account for that. That would
All
be
right, that's the
January
first one.
2021, okay.
I've shared a couple emails with Kevin, and in your 2020 Tokwa, we did not budget for propane, even though we've incurred, I don't know how much, Kevin, is it $15,000, $20,000 worth of propane this year?
Yes, and Steve, that was a budget miss for 2020. I looked back, and the last time that there was any propane ever charged to Tokwa was 1997. So I think we just happened to hit the budget cycle when the clubhouse was under construction for the last year and a half, which is why it was not budgeted. Jeff Mitzi, Andy, and myself made sure we built in propane across the board for both heating of the facility as well as cooking. So that cost, Andy has agreed to split that cost with us. I believe it's 65% for Andy, 35% for us. That's a single tank that handles Tokwa, so there's not a way to meter exactly what gets used by the cooking process versus heating the building. Obviously, during the winter months, you'll see in Jeff's budget, he's got January, February, March, and then picks it back up in the fall and winter months for the heating side. But Andy has more than agreed to pay for that portion.
So did you put that in utilities expense of $34,000?
Hold on one moment, Steve, we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me? Hello?
I can hear you, Steve.
Well, see if they can hear you.
Can you hear me? Can you hear anybody on Zoom?
They must have lost internet. I don't hear them.
Say again.
Can you
Me
hear
or
us, Parker?
Steve? Okay, am I coming through? I am in this room.
Steve, can you hear us at home?
Can you
Okay,
hear
will
me?
you say something?
Hello? Can you hear me?
Steve, I think they can hear you back in the control room, but we can't hear you in the big room.
Do you know sign language?
Bob
What about me,
Coates, will you
Parker?
say something and let's see if we can hear you?
Yes, I've been talking all along here. Can you hear me now? I think you've lost the Zoom audio.
Yeah,
So Steve, it's not just you.
that's good to know.
If you all can hear the question, just relay it to us. Take Carla's microphone and hold it against your
Steve,
computer.
do a mic check again if you would.
Can you hear me?
Hold on one second,
Yes.
Steve. All right, let's try this. Ask your question.
All right. Can you hear me?
You can't hear this microphone? All right, can you all hear me now out there? You can?
Can
Okay.
hear you.
All
Can
right,
hear you. I can
so let's
hear
try
you.
again, Steve. One more time. Ask your question.
Can you hear me? Can you hear
Can
me?
you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you both.
Okay, the question I had was, in Tokwa, is the propane in the $34,000 under utility expense?
In Tokwa is the propane in the $40,000 in utility expense.
34,000.
34,000, I apologize.
Is it in the utility? Oh, is it, yes, it is in the utility expense. Is that what? I don't know that that's the question, that's not, that is it. Okay, yes, the 34,000
Okay.
is in the utility expense, if that was your question, it includes propane.
Okay, next question. Yacht club subsidy and the assumptions. How many weddings, events are in the 2021 budget?
How many weddings or events are in the 2021 budget?
I don't have that answer off the top of my head, but I'll get it for you.
Well, here's a response. If you put a budget together, you had to make some kind of assumption to get to a $10,000 subsidy. How'd you come up with that without having the assumptions?
He would like to know what assumption you used to come up with that number that you have in there.
Yeah, $10,000
So-
subsidy.
I mean, that was from what's been going on for the last 3 months with the ones from this year moving to next year, and all the requests and site visits and everything that we've been doing. I mean, we're probably over the 30 count at this point, but it's a very much a live number. I mean, it changes every week. But we're definitely, looking at the fact that we're in September, already going into next year, we're in really good shape from a booking standpoint.
Beth, ask him, if you have more weddings, does that lower the subsidy?
If you have more weddings, would that lower the subsidy?
Yeah, absolutely.
Tell him I'll have to ask this question more detail when there's live connection.
All right, he would like to ask this question in more detail, probably next week, Steve, when you guys talk about it with the board.
Yep,
Yep.
and then I still have another question.
Okay.
The liquor sales in the yacht club of 12,000. What is the cost of goods for that liquor sale?
Mitzi, what is the cost of goods for the liquor sale that's embedded in the 12,000?
For revenue. The cost of service is already in there.
He wanted to know the cost of goods, right, Steve?
Yeah, because if you're going to sell liquor for 12 grand, how much did it cost you for the liquor?
So he wants to know if you're going to sell it for 12 grand, what did it cost you for the liquor?
I mean, the cost of goods is going to be roughly 85%, somewhere in there, because we're trying to give the village a deal and just, break even on this.
This is just going to be a comment, Beth. This is a budget. This is not a guess. So they have to know what they put in there for cost of goods.
Steve would like us to make sure that we're realizing that these are budgets and not guesses, and we need to make sure we're using numbers to build the budget. It was just a comment. All right, Bob, did you have a question too while I'm interpreting back here?
No question, but I have a request for tomorrow. When people in the yacht club are commenting, but they're not using a microphone, we can't hear a word they're saying.
I would agree, and I will
for-
make that same comment. This is for audience members, not to be talking without a mic. It's really hard for all the people online to follow along. We'll do better tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Beth.
You're very welcome. All right, you all can
I'm
have the
signing
room
off.
back.
That was my last thought. That was my last thought.
Okay, are we done?
I have a quick question about the Tokwa shades on the capital, $15,000. I am just curious. I know when the Kahiti Pub Committee asked about the curtains and heaters that they put in, it was recommended to them that they use private funding for that. And I'm just curious as to how this is considered different from that and why we would be considering making that capital expenditure.
I think one of the reasons is that side of the restaurant, the shades would help food service and customer satisfaction. It's more of not even a need, a want, it's a need. It almost makes that whole side completely unusable through parts of the day and even into the restaurant. The shades we have up in the restaurant just aren't enough for how bright that sun is right now. Now, once trees mature, but that's years and years in the making. Where I think at Kahidi, that covered the sun because it is such a big patio. You don't have that same, the sun coming in your face.
And one of the criticisms that we get about the Tokwa Pavilion is that same criticism, that it's not very usable at certain times of the day, certain times of the year, because there's not any awnings or shades there. And is that something that's just currently not on the radar, or is that something that's in the long-range plan that we're considering?
It's been brought up numerous times, and it's always considered. I guess it's just from a priority standpoint and the usage, where do we fit the money in? What's more important than another? It's hard to make those assessments.
Okay, and unless I just missed it, the pavilion expenses are included in the Tokwa restaurant? Is there anything separate? Okay.
I second Carla on that curtains and/or windows or whatever we need to do at the pavilion. We've talked about that year after year, and we never go anywhere with it. I think at least in this year, 2021, you guys need to do a study to see what the cost would be, what the additional revenue would be, use would be, because otherwise we just keep kicking this down the road and saying it's great. I know we've even gone out and looked at the Lakeside Tavern, how they put those windows in there, and how that is a year-round facility now, and they make money off of it. We've talked about it, but we never seem to go anywhere with it. If we're running out of space, as we know we are, and we could close that in, people could use that facility all year round. I'm not saying I'm for it or against it. I just don't have enough facts for it. We need to do a study this year of some sort to either run this to ground or just forget about it.
No problem.
Because it comes up every year. I'd like a commitment that you're going to do a study.
Committed.
All right.
Okay, is that it as far as questions or comments? Well, thank you to all the presenters, especially today. Thank you for everyone who attended, both live and remotely. Tomorrow's schedule will be primarily Simon Bradbury and Rec. We'll also have some admin presentations, HR, IT, general admin, and safety. So that's the agenda for tomorrow. And then Wednesday will be predominantly golf and consolidations and marketing. So marketing, golf, and consolidations for Wednesday. So thank you all for coming. Bob, you want to adjourn?
Yes.
Just nod.
If you can hear me, yes.
Okay, I think we just adjourned. Thank you all.